Welcome to episode 46 of the Coast to Coast AFL podcast with Nick and Blaze. This week it is the final episode of our preseason analysis series. We will be going through the 2024 runner-ups in the Sydney Swans, the West Coast Eagles, and the Western Bulldogs. We will also be having a brief chat about the Indigenous All-Stars game. Sorry, I was stumbling over my words. My God. And we might have a brief chat about some of the match simulation games some of the teams have been having over the past couple of days. If not, we will touch on those next week. But let's jump into it. How are you doing, Mr. Psyrick?
Not too bad, not too bad. Obviously, I was the designated WA person to go to the Indigenous All-Stars game. It was good to have one of us go, and it was very good. But we'll talk about that in a bit. I went with my dad, had dinner afterwards. There's a restaurant that, sort of, because to get in, we went to Vic Park Station, parked outside of it, and that's on the train line that goes into Perth Stadium. And yeah, had dinner afterwards, talked about sport. Probably one of the better connections I have talking with my dad. So, yeah. But apart from that, yeah, it's been all right. Yeah, I've done anything else actually. I was gonna say concerts, but that was last week, so it's mainly just mucking around with a few things, being a bit chill. But yeah, how about you? How are you going?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. I did some. I did had a realization earlier today that I streamed for 6 days last week, and it feels weird to have been that consistent. But I guess I had the time for it, so I figured I may as well.
Yeah. No, I saw that.
And then
Always in my inbox.
I went on my 5K run last night. My legs are not happy with me today because of it. But I'm breaking.
Yeah.
I'm getting new personal bests each time. I'm very
Nice.
close to doing it in under half an hour. Well, okay, to be technical, the whole run that I actually do is actually about 5.1 Ks, not a
Yeah.
solid 5. So I actually am doing 5 Ks in less than half an hour.
Yeah, I'll
But
give it to you.
5.1K, I'm like a little bit over. So I'm getting there.
Yeah.
I'm very proud of myself for committing to it. And
Yeah,
this
that's
whole.
awesome.
And then this week coming up, I'm going away. I'll be in Queensland from Friday to Monday, um, which I'm very much looking forward to. Going up there for a mate's 21st, which means there might be a lot of drinks consumed and a lot of good times had.
Youngsters these days. Youngsters these days.
Oh no, trust me, I'm a very social drinker. Like I try not to.
I feel it, yeah.
I try not to drink heavily or a lot, except for apparently when I'm up there.
Yeah, I'm sort of the opposite. I'm more of a weekend sort of person. If I'm going out somewhere, like if it's a home party, I can take my own, I might take a few, but drinks outside WA, it's too expensive.
Oh
All
yeah,
the FIFO money drives the drinks prices up. I'd much rather drink at home, you know what I mean? Just a
absolutely.
bit on the
Oh, I mean,
weekend.
yeah. Like we're just going to like the local bottle or whatever to just grab drinks. Like it's not going to be like at a
Yeah,
bar or whatever
exactly.
because that's too expensive.
Yeah, most
But
places is a bit like that.
that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about the footy,
Yes,
and specifically,
the
we
football.
are going to start with the Indigenous All Stars game because, as you said, you were there, and
Hmm.
we figured it's going to be a lot more fresh in people's minds. So we may as well have a chat about it now.
Yeah, and honestly, just starting off with the vibes, because, yeah, as I said, I went there with my dad. We sort of got there. I was planning to go a bit earlier. They said they had a few markets and all that. And I'm pretty sure it's the person who designed the bowl. Did a artwork. That was she did it at the stadium and then sold it on. Well, not sold it. There was a competition, to win it
Oh
on
yeah,
the screen. Unfortunately, my dad had a round of golf the time before, and being the old man that he is, he needed a bit of a nap beforehand. So we didn't quite get there early enough to really have a look around, but we did get the pre-match entertainment. There was Indigenous dancers there. I think it was about six people. All doing a very naturalist and celebratory dance.
mm-hmm.
Then it was Welcome to Country, obviously, and some of the pre-match stuff. When it was there, I was close to the wing. I'm not sure if Blaze, are you showing the photos now?
No,
Or...
I'm just scrolling through the stats and stuff.
Oh, okay. Well, no worries. So we were sitting on the wing. It was right next to the
But
reporters.
I
So,
should actually bring those
we
up.
saw... Oh, it's either or. But I was just saying, yeah, so we were right next to a few people. We got to see Catho Lachlan, great West Australian. Well, normally covers the WA games. I'm a huge fan of Kath.
I'm a big fan of Kath.
Yeah, but also with Eddie Betts for obvious reasons. There's a few others you saw were going around. Troy Cook, old Fremantle player, a bit before Blaze's era. Pretty sure he was like a halfbacker sort of player. But yeah, he's an ambassador and he did a lot of things. As well as Michael Johnson was there. I mistakenly thought it was Gab Wanganeen. I've got terrible facial recognition from distances, but my dad quickly corrected me. Chad Wingard was there as well, and all these sort of players. So it was good to see a lot of different people coming in to celebrate, and once the teams lined up after uh, welcome to country, I should say. Yeah, they both came down under the raised banner. Unfortunately, I stuffed up. I mentioned this beforehand. I was wearing my sunglasses. I accidentally put my phone on the wrong setting, so I didn't get any of the banner breaking through. But they both ran out as a team together. It was really, really nice. There was a lot of what do you call them? Those things that shoot out clayish sort of things that go in the air, like the color cannons, I guess.
Oh, like streamers
You
and
know,
stuff.
no, not streamers, but it's like a smoke plume,
Oh yeah,
but
yeah,
it's
yeah. There's just like
presenting as
smoke
like
machines,
chalk or
pretty
clay.
much.
Yeah, exactly. So it was all that sort of thing. So they did pretty solid, and yeah, as I said, the game itself, it's been talked about a bit, and you probably have heard it already, but obviously the Indigenous All-Stars probably, I wouldn't say they had more to play for, but they definitely had a lot more, I guess, aggressiveness and free-flowing side of their game. Because Fremantle, they were moving the ball pretty, I would say, boringly. Whereas the All Stars, they were very much fast paced from the wing,
Mm-hmm.
great ball movement, absolutely lethal as you expect when the ball hit the ground. And yeah, as I said, so there were some pretty great performances, but most of them were by the Indigenous All Stars. And I will say, um, start off, just mentioning some of these performances. The big performance, the one that won the Polly Farmer medal. Again, Polly Farmer is the ruckman that used to play for Geelong from Fremantle. Pretty much revolutionized. I don't know why I put that in air quotes, but you know what I mean. It's like he pretty much made the archetype for the aggressive style ruckman.
Mm-hmm.
Gets his own ball in the midfield. Very big handballing, not just a Tolby Satimba. So a great person to name the medal after. And it was Jai Simpkin, one of the more feel-good stories from the Indigenous All-Star game. I'm not sure when, but he did mention that he paid a lot of this game tribute to his late father, I think it was.
Grandfather.
Um, Grandfather. Okay. So yeah, he had 30 disposals, 6 marks, 3 tackles, a goal, and 10 clearances from 65% time on ground. He was absolutely everywhere. It was very Jai Simpkin-esque. It's just where either he was rotating, because a lot of the players, they sort of just popped in around positions. Only really the small forwards stayed in the forward line, and like some of the key defenders stayed put. But otherwise, most players were running freely everywhere, and Jai was just so good and clean everywhere. I also thought, like a lot of the movement players, I thought Lawson Humphreys for Geelong, again, WA person as well. He was very good. He was very composed with ball in hand. A lot of great movements. Messiah Wangani Milira, I'm very ashamed to say, again, this is like highlighting my bad vision because he was wearing number 7. I thought Jace Wanganeen was having a really, really good game. Jace Wanganeen? Jace Burgoyne. Well, it ended up being Jace Wanganeen. But then I realized that not only was I thinking number 7 was Wangaleen Milera, I thought Jace Burgoyne's possessions, who I think he was like 28. He had 17 disposals. So I like combined them together.
Fair enough.
But yeah,
It
absolutely
happens.
fantastic ball movement from them. And the good thing about the Indigenous All-Stars game is they did have a bit of like connection that they were used to. Obviously, Nasai Wangani Milera connected up with Brad Hill a lot. So they were very clean there. Bradley Hill obviously had a really good
Is
game.
this hang on,
Um,
sorry to interject. Is this the first time we've ever seen the Hill brothers play together? Or did they play together on initial teams before splitting?
no, because they're not the brothers. It's Stephen and Bradley that are
Oh,
brothers,
that's right.
and it is the first time that the Hill cousin
Cousins.
has played together.
I knew
So
one of them was a brother to someone. I just didn't remember for these two or
yes,
not.
and Bradley and Stephen used to play for Fremantle back in the day.
That's right.
Yeah. So, as I said, a lot of movement players got a lot. Kalachi, Kalemon, very good. Jamin Impey on the back line. My boy, probably the best port player by far, probably one of the better on ground. Jason Horn Francis, 3 goals, a lot of clearances. I think it's 4 clearances, 2 goal assists, 67 time on ground. So he had an absolute field day. He was a bit of touch of class. And one of the best moments, obviously, he didn't have too many game time. But the captain, Michael Walters, 31% time on ground, but he started in the middle and got a 50-meter penalty early. I'm still not sure what it was for, but he got a goal. So that was absolutely fantastic to see. I mentioned in terms of Richmond, both players that had played or not played. Morrissey had a bit of pressure. He didn't have too much time, but he was good to see. Same with the former Richmond player, Shai Bolton. He sort of just came on at the end and he
Just
wasn't
casually
really that
playing
much.
against his current team.
Yeah, exactly. So he had a few, but he wasn't really seen. As I said, I think it was, 30% time on ground, 6 disposals, just a run for him. I think they were being very cautious.
Sounds like Shea Bolton
Um,
during his regular season.
yeah, and some of the funnier moments I thought was there was one moment where Backman, uh, Brandon Walker. Oh, sorry. I didn't even mention Bradley Hill. Oh, not Bradley.
Bobby Hill.
Um, Bobby Hill kicked 3 goals and was no 4 goals, 4 goals, and was very live. And yeah, as I said, so Bradley Hill took a good mark. Bobby Hill took a good mark, and then in a split-second decision, instead of just trying to avoid contact, Brandon Walker tried to jump over his head and sort of got tangled up with the groin area. So basically, he accidentally put him in sort of a neck foot hold sort of. It was almost like a wrestling move, He could have put him in a hurricanrana and it wouldn't look too much off. So he got a 50-meter penalty and a free goal out of it. And the only other, terms of like preseason funny business was when Liam Reedy had a bit of a late hit on who was it? Liam Ryan, that's right. Because I think there was a few West Coast fans that were a bit worried. Pretty side on contact. He won't get weeks or anything, but it was a very late hit, 50-meter penalty, and fair to say some of the boys got a bit lively, a bit upset about that. So yeah, it's there's a bit going on. The last quarter was very, very plain. I should say the scoreline was 16-2 108 to 6-5 9-11. It just wouldn't be a Coast to Coast podcast without remembering to actually tell the scores.
It's a
So
bad
I'll give
habit of
that to you
ours to
now.
just not mention the scores, honestly.
Yeah. But yeah, as I said, like Freo, the first half it was a bit back and forth. All Stars generally had the wood. Freo came back, but yeah, as I said, you could sort of tell when Freo were rotating players, sort of their second tier players, because there was a few missing. Alex Pearce didn't play. Nat Fife didn't play. Obviously, Ruckman, Sean Darcy, still recovering from injury. Hayden Young, they didn't want to risk. I think there was another one. Um, Luke Ryan as well.
Hmm.
Didn't play. So, yeah. So as I said, so the players that Freo were bringing in were very young. And while, as I said, basically there was only really a couple of players for the All-Stars that weren't, possible, well, almost being certain to lock for best 22, because, you had players like Ash Johnson, Co Livingston, you know, probably, when you got those sort of names being the lower end, you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like, pretty good. Joel Jeffries was another one. I actually confused him a lot for Joel Hamling. And I thought he was like doing a really good job at fullback, but Joel Hamling, a pretty good game for a fullback that's sort of been with injury. We'll talk about his team. If you don't remember, Joel Hamling now plays for Sydney. I had to explain that to my dad because he thought he was delisted from Freo. He's like, I thought he retired.
No, he was
But
he was
no,
traded.
I think traded. Yeah, yeah. But either way. So yeah, as I said, it was good. For Freo though, I will say, the usual suspects were pretty good. Some of the halfbackers had a lot to do. Corey Wagner was very involved. Jeremy Sharp, he was being a bit of a sharp shooter. Kicked a couple of really nice goals from the boundary, looking pretty lively on the wing. So while a lot of their transition wasn't that good, they had a lot of unforced turnovers that they wouldn't be happy about. Um, yeah, as I said, some of their general play stuff was all right. And I think Nathan O'Driscoll was the one that Freo fans would be most excited about after this game because he has an absolutely feast. A lot of time on the wing, 17 disposals, but that was only from 66% time on ground. A lot of marks, 10 marks, 6 tackles. So he's involved in a lot. And you could see he was really trying for the Dockers. But overall, very good contest. A few players, as I said, I think we're not trying harder, but you know what I mean? Like, there was definitely a few players that were like designated pressure players, a few players just working into it for Fremantle. And as Longmire said, I don't know if you've seen the quote, but he said basically all that they were going to plan to do was play vanilla football. They weren't going to expose any of their tactics, especially since it was being televised and a bit more access than other teams most would be.
Yeah.
So that's fair enough. I know a few players are having a bit of a knock on Freo. We had a bit of a chat before, but don't pay attention to any of that.
No,
Like,
it doesn't really
like
mean
practice.
much.
No, it's a bit weird because, as I said, like the rotations were if Fremantle were playing like a last sort of practice match, but they definitely weren't really, they weren't pulling out old stops. They weren't trying to adjust for what, the All-Stars were trying to do. I think the All-Stars actually adjusted to Fremantle. Like, there was a lot of smart things because you can tell whether it's just from their forward line being very small or, they really had a big focus on knocking the ball to ground in their forward entries.
Mm-hmm.
And that really advantaged them. There was a lot of crumbing goals. Absolutely beautiful play. They had a couple of, like Finlayson, he played a bit down forward line, but most of the time it was like, your sub 190 centimeter players there. So, yeah, they were making do. Whereas I said, I don't think Fremantle did any adjusting for the oppositions. Their forward line entries were very conventional. As I said, they just didn't really have the link up. But yeah, as I said, hopefully for the future, we'll see more matches like this. Hopefully, some of the noise of the preseason doesn't scare Freo off, but both clubs have a really good Indigenous history. So even if it doesn't go to Fremantle, I hope it stays into WA because I can definitely see this being with West Coast. Or, as I said, even if it's like an amalgamation game, you know what I mean? Like, if it's like, playing a bit more of a mix of Eagles and Dockers player, and then, have that slightly beforehand and then just have the normal practice runs for Freo.
Yeah.
And West Coast, obviously. So,
Yeah, I mean,
I will say, oh, sorry, one last thing.
no, go on.
They played this game in WA the 15th of February, 35 degrees at, they started the game at 4:30, which was pretty risky. Like, it could have been a lot worse. Like, the stadium, it was very nice in the shade. But you didn't you didn't want to have much possession in the sunny side. It was quite warm. There's not too much breeze that comes across in the stadium because of the way it's built. So,
Yeah.
yeah, AFL. I know you want that Vic time viewers, but if it's in February, 6 o'clock is the earliest you should be putting it on, not 4:30. Like, it's just
But
no.
yeah, but they also they had to try to make it easier for East Coast viewers as well, because 6 p.m. over there is 9 p.m. over here. It's
Yeah, but I
pretty
think the
late
East
to
Coast
watch a
viewers
game
are
of footy.
like, I know, but yeah, player welfare. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
true.
especially, I know there's a lot of rotations, but you don't want like an injury coming from a bit of exhaustion and all that. Just you know what I mean? Like, it was obviously, I don't know if it was heat affected, but the famous one with Tyrone Vickery where he tries to take a contested mark from no one. Um, you might know it was when he was playing for Richmond.
There's a
Was it
fair chance it's
as
in
well?
my memory somewhere, but I got
Yeah. Oh, it's a bit of a throwback, but he basically just tries to take a mark when the ball was nowhere near, like literally at the other end of the ground, and they actually suspected he had heat stroke. So that's what I was referring to for you unassuming viewers. But yeah.
fair enough. I do feel like I feel like we got robbed a little bit with this game purely for the fact that Daniel Rioli didn't play, and it would have been the first time that three Riolis would have been in one team together in AFL history.
Hmm.
It would have, which is crazy because a team with three Riolis in it is too powerful. That's why it hasn't ever happened.
Honestly, yeah, you're right. Like a few of the other brothers have played in the same team, but the Riolis tend to be a bit separate. It's a bit weird.
Yeah, because like obviously
Like
we
obviously,
had Daniel and Morris prior to Daniel
hmm,
being at Gold Coast. We've had
to Australia.
Willie, who's was at
Yeah.
West Coast and now Port Adelaide. We had Cyril obviously at Hawthorn. Dean was at Essendon.
Hmm.
So yeah, they've been a bit all over the place. Oh, obviously Morris Senior obviously is at Richmond as well.
Yeah, exactly. The Richmond, and if you're a West Australian, a lot of ties to Claremont as well.
Mm-hmm.
Very big waffle player. He also played with his son too. I remember that going to the grand final, and it was Morris and Morris Rioli Junior, and Morris Rioli Senior playing for Claremont. That was a really touching moment. I don't think Claremont won that though. Bloody Subi.
Because I
Anyway.
because as much as I think, and I agree that like this, if they do bring back the All Stars game for like either every year or every other year,
Hmm.
to keep it in WA, I think that's a great idea. But I would love to see other teams maybe playing it, not just Frio and West Coast. Like say like Richmond, for
Yeah.
example, just because they also have strong Indigenous ties.
Exactly. And it's like you could do it so you could have like you have this, they stay here for the week and then play their intra club match. Not intra, their proper preseason
Yeah,
match
like
that,
for example, for
normally a week
Richmond, it would
after.
have been perfect because they could have played the All Stars and then gone into their match sim with West
Hmm.
Coast. That's happened
Yeah.
today as we're recording this.
That being said, Richmond do have the dream time, so
True,
they're not
we
really
do kind of get
likely.
that spotlight, which we
Yeah.
get Dream Time, we
The
get
one
Anzac
thing.
Eve, you know.
Yeah. But there's others like I think Port have a pretty strong history. GWS now are starting to, you know what I mean. So we'll see. But
Yeah, it is very good to see
yeah, it's one of those things
a lot of the
where
teams to start branching out a lot more in terms of
yeah,
Indigenous talent.
yeah. And as I said, they announced at the stadium it was 40,000. I looked at stadiums. There's a site that look at that stuff. It's at 38, so it was pretty much 40,000 for a practice match. A lot of that was seated around $30. As I said, there were some general admission tickets. I didn't actually see if they were cheaper. Or maybe I just paid more for the wing seat. I can't remember to be honest. But yeah, as I said, so it was pretty good atmosphere, very good vibes, and yeah, overall I think it was pretty much a success. It was just once people realized that was practice football. I must admit, there was some chirpy Freo fans at the start. Like, there was a few umpire booing early on, and I'm like, it's a practice match. You know what I mean? Like, you gotta get the chance for the umpires to warm up too. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, you're definitely
It's
not
what it
wrong
is.
because like the
Yeah,
umpires are
it's
also
like,
have been out of the game for a couple of months as well. Like chill.
yeah, exactly. So, there was a few strange calls. There was like one mark that got played on that Rob Frio that people got upset about, and there was another one that just seemed to not get called, but apparently it was touched, but the crowd got very upset about. So, yeah, as I said, just bits and pieces here and there. It was more funny than anything. If you got too upset about it, if you're like aggressively, I think you just got to touch grass at that point. But yeah, as I said, most people were pretty good. It was still pretty family friendly. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I figure it would be. Like, it's not meant to be a big, like a huge sort of um,
Yeah,
like it's not meant to be like a regular season match. It's meant to be pretty, pretty chill, pretty fun.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And the Freo fans were like looking forward to seeing some of the newer players as well. So, like Liam Reed, not Liam Reed, um, the one that's just Reed, um, not Harley, the new one.
Uh,
Ed, no,
you've lost me on
what's
this
his
one.
name? Well, their number one, their first round draft pick for this year. I've forgotten his name.
You need to look through the
Idiot.
notes.
Look down the bottom. Not Hugh Davies. Not Liam. Where is he? I can't see him.
It's in there somewhere.
Oh, Murphy Reed. Murphy Reed.
There we go. That's
it.
right.
Yeah, I think it was like pick 16 because it was Bo Allen, Joe Berry, and Murphy Reed. I'd already forgotten his name.
That's right.
Yeah.
And yeah, if we do get time after the end of our preseason analyses, I might briefly touch on the Richmond and West Coast match sim, as I've kind of already briefly touched on. But for those that are interested, our number one draft pick is Sam Laylor did play, along with Jasper Alger and Thomas Sims. Bad news, Laylor did walk away with a concussion.
Yeah.
However, it's not any worse than that, thankfully. So he'll miss next week's preseason match against Collingwood, I think it is. But it should be okay for round one if he's all, if they do want him to play round one.
As long as he doesn't have any like post concussion symptoms, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
sometimes it stays around a bit longer. Because it was nasty. He had like that back reflex, sometimes you go cockroach,
Yeah,
which is where your hand sort of sees. He just sort of sprang up afterwards, which is not the greatest sign. It normally means you definitely are concussed, but unfortunately, when you saw the hit, that was pretty obvious. It was just very unfortunate. Unfortunately, Ruben Gibney, and I would like to see the AFL tighten in, is like, it felt like a very avoidable thing because he sort of pushed him into the contest.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know what I mean? Because it was a push in the back free, but it was just very sloppy and it's a very high risk thing to do. So
Yeah.
like I said, I'm not going to go after him. Like, as I said, you've seen other players do it. It's not that great, but you'd like to see the AFL. If that's one of the things where they could probably tighten up a tiny bit.
Yeah, 100%. All right, shall we jump into our analyses?
Mm-hmm. And we are starting with the almost premiers, the minor premiers for 2024, the Sydney Swans. And oh boy, when they started, I mean, it was a pretty hard fixture because at the time they started off obviously with Melbourne and the Magpies, and both of them were top four from last year, and they just dealt with it comfortably. So they were looking good, and then came out of nowhere. The loss against the Tigers. You know what I mean? So some people were on to Sydney early, and then they lose to the Tigers, and you're like, yeah, we're pretty sure the Tigers are terrible, so we're not sure what happened there. So, other teams like Geelong, GWS get all the love. But after that, a run of 10-game win streak absolutely put them in position to make the most out of 2024. They get 13-1 by their bye at the end of round 15 to sit on top of the ladder.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll be known for running out games strong, starting slowly, but being able to chase teams, run them to the ground, restrict some of the ball movement by the other team while scoring healthily from the back half of the ground, which sort of also complemented their forward half scoring, which was one of the best in the league.
Mm-hmm.
Then the fairy tale run ended. Logan McDonald missed a shot against the Dockers that would sort of get them continuing the streak. So they get their first match. And then out of nowhere, against the Saints, who had just lost Max King, lost by 2 points at Marvel Stadium. And it was sort of like, the warning signs for Sydney. We discussed about it. They never look quite the same after that. Like the
Yeah.
game against Freo was very good. They had a close loss against the Lions. That looked very good. The Bulldogs got on top of them, and then again that demolishing loss by the Power. Both the Bulldogs and the Power game had a combined margin of 151 points. I think it was like 100-ish by Port and 49 by the Bulldogs.
It was
It's there. I could have just
112 by Port and 39 by the Bulldogs.
yeah. Okay. Um. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So they finished with 17-6 record, 110%, 0.04 margin, and again clear on top of the moment premiers. So they still look good enough going into the finals. And most people were like, yeah, they still probably give fair chance to win the premiership. They got that spook early on by GWS, but the heroics of Heaney was one of the few people that sort of prevented this from becoming a straight away finals blemish. I think that provide him enough stability with a week off to then spank an inefficient Port, as they really got a lead early and then just spent the rest of the game denying their pretty weak forward line entries, as they just put in the queue in the rack for the 36-point win. Again, we've mentioned this before. It was a very solid win, but it wasn't comprehensive, and it felt like they could have done more. They had some issues stats-wise that I sort of highlighted with my pre-finals analysis. That's why I wasn't that hot on them.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't predict Brisbane, though, absolutely destroying them with their offense. They got very exposed in the back line, and essentially they got exposed, getting 120 points scored against them, scoring 60 points themselves for a 60-point loss in yet another grand final.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess now that some time has passed, and obviously, Horse has passed on the reins to Dean Cox as head coach. Like it was
Mm,
kind of when you look at just how that second half of the season kind of went, it kind of did end up being pretty solid writing on the wall at the end of the day. That like maybe not that the wheels were starting to fall off, but their
mm.
their holes had started to become visible to other teams.
Yeah, exactly. And as I said, it's a good point to start with because some of the stats even you can sort of see this, see it coming. Because again, I am, not cherry picking, but choosing to highlight different stats. So while there are a few reds there, that's just because it's interesting. You know what I mean? So I'm not saying like because there's a lot of red, there's a lot of middling stats. That they were a very mediocre team.
Yeah.
But for as much as they had stuff that was really good, there was also stuff that was a bit lacking, and especially in defense, some of that got exposed. And offensively, because they were very one-dimensional and they couldn't get certain parts of the game going,
Mm-hmm.
that directly affected their scoring rate. Because as I said, in the regular season, scoring was fantastic. Second in goals with 14.1 per match. They have the highest goal scorers per match with 8.8 unique players scoring a goal every match and 10.1 goal assists per match. The only team to reach double digits in that. So they were a very passing offense. Only sixth in shots taken, which sometimes, as I said, that might seem low. But when you're getting like, when you're very accurate, which they were fifth in the league, sometimes you just get less shots because you're converting more.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not always a bad thing. Score differential. Sorry, X score differential. I want to point this out because I've listed a few X score stats here, and this goes with the accuracy as well. One thing I will say about Sydney is that normally you see the X score and all that, and like you're very lucky. Like some of the best teams will be around a goal over in X score for the season. Because you
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean? Like, sometimes you can have a good run, but most of the time, for most teams, you're pretty much shooting average.
Yeah.
Um, Sydney converted a lot from very hard shots. So their X score per shot was 3.15,
Mm-hmm.
but they were just converting. Um, and the differential, as I said, for the Scots they scored, it was like 10, around 10-ish, which again is really high. And then also they were benefited from the fact that other teams were shooting, I think it was just like 1.1 under. So not only were they assisted by shooting above average, teams generally shot less under them. So it's a very weird quirk. I'm not going to say that they're very lucky, but I think it's one of those stats that sort of add on to other things to where you start to see where some of this variability comes from. They were eighth in inside 50s. Goals per inside 50 was very, very good, 26.2, which was second. Same with set shots per inside 50, second at 47.8. Score per inside 50, 49.8. But again, that sort of comes with accuracy. Nothing to be concerned about there. But the opposition rebound rate, they did not let the ball come out of defense. That was 72.3. Again, though, comes with good accuracy as well, because opposition rebound rate, if you score a behind and then it comes out, it counts as a rebounded entry. So, again, good accuracy will get you there. The offensive one-on-one, though, that's where it starts to rain. And this is where I'm saying, like, some of their forwards, and this sort of you get when you look through the team, some of their tall forwards weren't that great. So offensive one-on-ones, tied 7th in the league, around bang average. One-on-ones, 10.1, again, round bang average. Tackles inside 50, 9.5, 16th in the league. Ground ball gets inside 50, 14.3, tied 12th in the league. Mark inside 50 rate, 12.12, 16th in the league. Marks was also fairly low. It was a tiny bit higher, but not much. So when you look at those three stats at the bottom, you wouldn't really associate that with like the number 2 offense.
No, you wouldn't.
You know what I mean? So this is what I'm saying is like conventionally, and we've talked a lot about this, like Sydney's forward line, they weren't all that special. Like Logan McDonald had a pretty good year. I think Hayden McLean, the ruckman, sort of, punched above his weight a bit. But then you got Joel Amarty, that was all in pretty much one game, his input. Papley had a bit of an under year. They were playing players like Sam Wicks, Robbie Fox, who weren't doing much. A lot of their goals came from their midfield.
Yeah.
In fact, I think I wrote it here. Okay, yeah, I did. So there was 8 midfielders that scored over a goal a game in 2024, and 3 of them belonged to Sydney, being Parker, Heaney, Warner. Keep in mind, Parker only played 16 games, and they all were at 1.4 a game, which was 0.1 below the highest in the league. Can you have a guess at who it is, Blazy?
Well, considering I'm reading the document, I would say it's Shea Bolton.
It is Shea Bolton. So, yeah. So as I mentioned, a lot of stuff from that offense was to do with their midfield, who were pretty good. Disposals, they didn't use much of the ball, but that was still positive. They were very good at meters gained and were the best team at limiting their opponent's meters per disposal. So I know that says 15.1 first. So basically, their opponents couldn't move the ball as long. They were forced into a lot of short kicks, all that sort of stuff. Senior themselves, again, choosing to go long, 61.8 in terms of percentage of disposals that were kicks. Their clearance differential was good enough, 0.7 positive compared to their opponents, 7th in the league. Inside 50 differential was good enough, 2.6 positive, 7th in the league. They weren't that great at the ground ball and the tackling and the pressure. They definitely chose to mark a lot. So ground ball differential, 3.8 lost, tied 13th in the league. Tackles, 58.3, 13th in the league. Pressure acts, 28.5, 285.8, 14th in the league. 1%ers were first in the league. I think there was a reason why I wanted to put this out. Oh yeah, because they're one of the best spoiling teams in the league. So when I put that in movement, because I put spoils in defense, but it was sort of like a both situation.
Oh yeah.
Where their defenders were getting a lot of spoils. Because again, they were a bit undersized, didn't win many marking. But also that sort of flowed on into the midfield, and you saw a lot of midfield having 1%ers. Most of the time, 1%ers are spoiled. Sometimes they differ a bit, but when you look at the midfielders, you can kind of see that. So
yeah,
I just like to put that. They got a lot of marks themselves, so that's why I was talking about restriction. A lot of their restriction was them being able to take marks and restricting their opponent's marks. But again, and this could be a forward line stats, their contested marks were 18th in the league, tied at 7.9. And a lot of that was because their forwards didn't take as many marks. Again, Amarty, McLean, McDonald, I think all of them, I don't think any of them were above average in contested marks. I have to have another look, but I'm pretty sure I checked that. And the other thing was post clearance ground ball gets and post clearance center possession. Again, where you saw some of the scores come against them, it was sort of from losing clearances, losing a bit of shape. They generally like the ball in general play a lot more than clearances themselves, even though that midfield was very solid.
Mhm.
It was a lot more solid when they had the ball in hand rather than like, because, well, I guess it's sort of the sliding scale because they were fantastic at defending in the air, in the ground, not so much. So just, a bit of awareness there. But, as I said with Sydney, a lot of great stats, and then you just have a few stats that were near bottom of the league,
Yeah.
which, as I said, for first is very strange. Finishing up now in defense, again, they're a team 11.2 goals against per game, which is tied 15th in the league. But they're one of the teams where a lot of this was coming from a lack of entries. So the opposition shots, they limited to ninth in the league, 24.8.
Mm-hmm.
Goals per inside 50 was still very good, 21.9. But when you look at scores inside 50, and this is where I was going with the accuracy thing, partly by design, partly again because of the X scores, 48.8, which is 14th in the league. So oppositions were scoring at a fairly normal rate against Sydney. It's just not a lot of them were going to goals. Opposition accuracy was 44.9, which is the 18th in the league. And they were forced to make the harder shots. So the opposition X score per shot was 3.01, which is first in the league. Because I mentioned that Sydney were taking difficult shots. But that's still almost 0.14, which doesn't mean much, but generally you're looking at about, I think it was like the range was about 3.3 to 3.01.
Oh yeah.
So as I said, there's a fair bit of gap, like that's halfway-ish between theirs and their opponents. Opposition mark inside 50 rate, ninth in the league, 23.2, and they gave up the 10th amount of inside 50 opposition marks, 11.8. Opposition ground ball gets, they were able to get a healthy amount, 15.2 at ninth in the league, so nothing woeful, but as I mentioned, I think these stats would have been a lot worse with more inside 50s against. It's just that for the most part, again, the way that Sydney played, they controlled possession, and just didn't allow many good quality inside 50s. So they prevented their opponents from scoring from stoppages. That was very good, 28.7, third in the league. They defended well from defensive half, 27.4 in the league, second.
Mm-hmm.
I've already mentioned the spoils, I won't print it out again. And they had a very healthy rebound rate. Again, the flip side, sort of the other thing, opponents scoring a lot of behinds will artificially inflate that a bit, but tied third at 76.6, it was still fairly healthy. So without dominating any particular thing, it just seemed like Sydney's defense was good enough.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Some areas that were a bit poor. And I forgot to mention, defensive one-on-one win percent, 28.8, which is 12. But they had the least amount of defensive one-on-ones per game, which is 8.4. I don't think. So again, they never really forced one-on-one. And you can sort of tell this is why the mark inside 50, not what am I talking about? This is why the spoils were so high, I should say, because they had a lot of players that would come in, your Rampies, your Melicans, Tom McCartan, just coming in, spoiling the contest, playing very safe,
Mm-hmm.
and while that I did allow the opposition to get a few ground balls, as long as, they were good enough at defending from stoppage where as long as they could tie it up, they were pretty good. So nothing concerning, but as I said, and I guess, I don't know if this overview sort of painted that picture, but there was enough exposed to where you could see something like the Brisbane game happening. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Especially when you have such a ferocious forward half team. It was just like one of the worst matchups that Sydney could have gotten. Because, yeah, as I said, they're defensively solid enough to rebuff most of that. Their midfield matched up really well. So Sydney's midfield advantage wasn't so pronounced. And as I mentioned, their defense one-on-one got exposed a bit. So some of the small forwards got a bit loose and were able to wreak havoc.
Yeah, exactly right. And the story's already been told. Brisbane became the premiers because of it, and Sydney left in the dust once more.
Yes, and it's sort of hard to like figure out where to go from this. And they've got a very interesting list changes as we bring that up. So they didn't pick anyone up, which is very interesting. New coach, you maybe think, one or two players you might bring in just to even just you might have a few ideas of how you're going to change up the game, that sort of thing. You might want a certain player that's, not in their own club, but you think fills a certain role. But yeah, none of this. It was all draft picks for Sydney.
Mm-hmm.
They drafted, obviously being minor premiers, didn't have a high draft pick to start with. So their first pick was number 22 at Jesse Detoli, Ned Bowman, 26, Rayleigh Bice, 41, Riak Andrews at pick 55. And then in the rookie draft, they pick up Ben Patton. He used to be from the Saints. He's a small defender. And Blake Liedler, also from the rookie draft.
Just a side
Again,
note on Riak Andrew. And I know we
mhm,
mentioned this when we initially went through um, all of the draftees. But
mhm.
Riak Andrew is the brother of Mac Andrew, who is at the Gold Coast Suns.
Yes, yes. And I think he also plays a defensive role as well. So,
Yeah, I believe they play very
yeah.
similarly.
Yeah, again, I don't know exactly, but I did look because I was interested in the profiles, but a lot of these are either small forwards or backmen.
Hmm.
I'm pretty sure Bice, Bowman, and Patton are the backmen, and Bowman, Bice, and Liedler are forward. I think Liedler's tall, Bice and Bowman small. Don't quote me on that, but that sort of mix. So it's either in the forward line or back line, which, as I said, going through the stats sort of makes sense though. They're the areas that not so much patching up, but if it does improve, Sydney will be back on top.
Yeah, sure.
Um, Looking at the outs though, I mentioned him before. Fairly big loss still. Wasn't that utilised in 2025, but a bit of a shock. 2024, I should say, but a bit of shock he left. Luke Parker traded to North. North really needed the experience. They'll benefit a lot from having him.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's a bit of a shock to see him go.
Yeah, it was a shock to
And
everyone because
yeah,
we
and
were
they let
expecting him to be pretty much a one cop player.
yeah.
He's so close to his 300th game because everyone thought it was going
Mm.
to be at Sydney, but not anymore.
Yeah, well, it makes sense, but as I said, it's a weird one because Luke Parker definitely personifies the Sydney way of playing, and
Mm.
I guess maybe you think maybe the mix is a bit too heavy, and now that Luke Parker's getting old, you don't need him as much, but yeah, I just think it's very important. But North Melbourne's benefits from that, and Jacob Castante, a young star, tall, traded to North as well, part of the Luke Parker trade, and he showed a bit of promise. It was a bit speculative pick always. But North basically get him for steak knives, and they need some key forward players. So, again, probably you can understand why they got rid of him, but considering that they've got a good forward mix, but the rotation's a bit iffy. Might have been okay having him around, but they moved him on.
Yeah.
It is what it is. Um, and delisted, they get Harry Arnold gone, Jaden Magor gone, Lachlan McAndrew gone, Cooper Vickery gone. All players I didn't really see much of the park. I'm not even sure if any of them played a game.
I
Um,
got no idea.
I think Cooper might have. I did look. Because, yeah, it's one of those things where I had to try and convince my dad, like, the AFL average games played is like, I think it's something ridiculous like 9. Like,
Yeah, it's
we have
it's very
73
small.
hundred players, but a lot, when you go through the delistings, like, if you just go through them, you see none, 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 none. And then Sam Reid, who would probably be like 170 odd, who retired. They'll be missing him, but he never played much of 2024 and hasn't really been a part of their side for a while. So, well, we do miss him. He goes, and yeah, that's the list changes.
Yeah, it's pretty succinct. It's again, as you said already, like it's very interesting that it didn't really look at the trade period or the free
Mm,
agency period in terms of like
no.
maybe getting
Well,
some.
they technically picked up some draft picks.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's all they got out
Yeah,
of the
they got
Parker
draft picks out of
Costanti.
the Park trade and the Costanzi trade, but like
Yeah, I think that's the Bowman pick by memory, but
yeah, I think they were after like a player or two very specifically. But in
yeah,
terms of like just maybe looking at some proven talent to bring in, it's very interesting that
mm,
Cox or didn't really look at that at the
yeah.
time.
Actually, now think of it. I think it was pick 41. I think it might have been Riley Bice. Like, they didn't give up much.
Might
So,
have been.
yeah, as I said, they've got a good list, though. So, while we mentioned that, they've got young, long players. They may need to do some tinkering. Cox might have to work on that. We'll talk about that in the optimism. But when we go to the players of importance, there's a lot to work with. And these are some fairly quality players still. Though, if they lift, you should see a very decent increase in production. A bit of an obvious one, Logan McDonald, key forward. Overall, Sydney's forward stats, as we mentioned, are pretty low for such a high-performing offense. And I will say, like, it's a bit weird. Like, he mentioned he might be moving to Fremantle. He had a lot of hype, as the best player. And then he just improved a bit from 2023 to 2024. And I feel like all the hype dropped off him. He missed that shot. He was a bit unlucky and all that. And all of a sudden, people gone very cold on him. But he's only 22. As a key forward, he did improve. And the only really thing that I think he will improve, because as I said, Sydney had the lowest 1v1s, and Logan McDonald got a lot of them. It was just a very poor win rate. So, whether that's just, Logan McDonald sort of finding, positioning, how to position himself from rebounds where most one-on-one contests go, or whether it's like wider leading patterns, because sometimes he goes a bit wide, sometimes he'll take that narrow angle lead. So if he works on that, takes a few more marks inside 50, maybe even takes a few contested marks, you know, he'll look good. And I think the fresh coach might incorporate him more because it'll be very interesting. And I haven't quite mentioned it, but like how much of this midfield centric offense Dean Cox will be taking in 2024 to 2025. Because they've got a good talent in the forward line. So it's like, does Cox go more direct or does he do the same as last year? And if he's looking to change a few things, I think Logan McDonald then comes the player you sort of work around when it comes to that forward line still.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyway, we're going to Callum Mills now. Sort of forgotten about really, because he missed almost all of the regular season, ruled out very early, and all of a sudden, Sydney put Isaac Heaney in the middle, and it's like Callum who, he takes the spot in the inside mid. All things considered, though, when he came back, he was very, very solid. And then he injured his hamstring at training, which ruled him out post the Giants game. So he didn't even get to make finals. He had a very unlucky season. But what I think he does bring that's a bit different from Sydney's stats profile is more of the ground level stuff. So tackling was okay. Obviously, they had some really good players like Rowbottom. But again, some of those ground ball gets, maybe some of those like post contested stuff might see a bit of a lift. If midfield, Callum Mills come back into the inside mid, or as I said, if they look to change their defensive structure, increase a few of their ground ball gets, they could even play him off the halfback flank, where he sort of floats in between. Sometimes he's a halfback flanker, sometimes he's an inside mid. So a lot of flexibility. They will be loving having him back as long as he stays healthy.
Yeah, 100%. And he's their captain too. So having that on-field leadership is also an added bonus.
Yeah, I feel like Sydney's a team though that they've got so much depth in older players, and a lot of them played finals. Where I think missing their captains like less.
Oh yeah, well, considering like Heaney's vice captain, it's probably not really too much of a difference there currently, anyway.
But in terms of flexibility, in terms of just having another leader, it's always good. So
yeah, for sure.
I'll be looking forward to having him back. Dane Rampy, I'd like to point out because I don't think he had a bad 2024, but it wasn't the I'll say it wasn't the greatest. You know what I mean? He was just serviceable. But I will say, in terms of small defenders at Sydney, Rampy is by far the best. I won't say shutdown defender, but you know what I mean? Like, he keeps the smalls quieter than other options. Obviously, Blakey and Florent, they're taking the more offensive rebound roles. Florent obviously moving in the back half this year. And again, he was serviceable, but you know what I mean? Like, you could tell that Sydney were sacrificing, again, some of their defensive structure because they're like, we're going to win the ball enough. If we can prevent some of these things from even happening, we're going to have like really good rebounding. So, so it means that Dane Rampy has to take more. And I think he just needs one last good year because Sydney, have some good young talent. Like we're seeing the rise of Matt Roberts. There's another one there, like a couple of draft picks, some from this year, some from last year. That might eventually replace Rampy. You know what I mean? He just got to hold the fort for another year.
Yeah.
Just to keep that defense ticking. Talking about defense, I've put a little both because they're both sort of the same thing. Joel Hamley and Lewis Melican, Melican the Pelican, both key defenders. And this is where Sydney start to get really vulnerable. And we saw it when both Rampy and Lloyd went missing for a couple of games at the last half of 2024. They look really exposed. And they have a lot of young players, that can only fill the roles if some of these people go down. So, again, Hamling and Melican, they're not historically durable. So if they can get 20 and 30 games between them, because I trust their defense. Hamling is more serviceable than good, but the same can be said about Melican. Like Melican's a good defender. I wouldn't put him in like the upper tier of key defenders though. So they need that sort of thing. Otherwise, really, in terms of key defenders, it's really only Tom McCartan back there.
Yeah.
Like on an island sort of thing. Because he had a really good last year. It was just, and I always forget, he's only 24, McCartan. Like, you know what I mean? Because there's such an age gap between him and his brother. I always thought he was like 28 and all that, but no, he's only 24. So, it's already a lot to put on the shoulders of a 24-year-old. And I know Rampy can sometimes play tall. He's very versatile.
Yeah.
But yeah, they just need a bit more support there, and that's where they can really get exposed. And finally, again, with the loss of Parker, you're looking at players he may be able to pick up. Again, probably not my favorite player. You did mention him a bit last year. But I think, he had a very good... But did he have a good... No, I'm thinking of Robbie Fox. But anyway, young player, working to be best 22, Sam Wicks. I think he's sort of the sort of person that, it's a bit of a step down from Parker, but you just play him. He's playing a similar sort of role. He's very good on the ground. Offensive distribution is sort of where his best attributes are, which again, very similar to Parker. Obviously, he doesn't have that on-ball ability, but, as I said, they have enough of that in Sydney's forward line slash midfield. They're like the Bulldogs. They're midfielder, essentially their forward line, and their forward line's basically their midfield. But yeah, I did mention it was very weird. He was suspended in the VFL for that hit, rubbed him out for 4 weeks, and then he got omitted for a game. I don't know if you remember the in-house drama. I completely forgot until I Googled Sam Wicks again. But remember when he apparently said something inappropriate to the girlfriend of another player? When I say inappropriate, it was just not very well taken. I don't think it was anything untowards.
I've only
then all of a sudden,
vaguely remember this.
Yeah, and it was Sydney cleared him of all wrongdoing, but they also benched him for a game. And I was like, what the hell happened? You know what I mean? It's you move on, but it was just weird. So, so hopefully not in the bad books enough to play an important role in 2025. And new faces, again, nothing really new. Hey, I did write where the players are. I thought I'd check. Dertoli and Bowman might be future small forward options, while Bice is a mature age body defender who, along with Patton, who is a bit of a small defender, might help in a bind if injuries occur. I don't think many of these players will play this year, but Sydney's depth is pretty thin, so you might see one of them. Reasons for optimism. Sydney dominated a lot last year. That's pretty good. They've finished 100 premierships. That's pretty good. Their age profile is very healthy, good amount of experience, a tiny bit of youth. And as I said, it's probably one of the best lists inherited in a hand rover since probably his predecessor in Horst Longmire. Getting that, list from Paul Roos.
Yeah.
Which again happened a bit before Brad Scott, who would be Chris Scott, which would be the elder one, Yeah, I'm not sure if that was technically a handover.
Because Horst got the reins of Sydney in 2010-ish?
Yeah, I want to say, and then get the premiership in a couple of years after that. So, yeah, as I said, so again, it's pretty nice succession from Sydney. They've been a very good team for a very long time.
They have.
Their forward line production, despite their young forwards not really producing many statistics, AFL average. Sorry, their forward line production was fantastic despite their young forwards. So they've got a rebuilding forward line, but that just doesn't matter for them. So if they get natural growth, theoretically, you could overtake the Cats as like the next best offense. As the next best offense in the league. Like, I got some reservations about Sydney, but I could definitely see them continuing in like the forward line. But as I said, even it's just a matter of whether they can keep production up. But they've got really good midfield. And Sydney's fixture, to wrap it all up, it has some nice niceties to it. They go back to back at the SCG against two tough teams to open. So I always think it's nice getting the tough teams early at home because generally you're a bit rusty. So a lot of the advantage, just comes from, home ground advantage sort of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, if you're playing a tough team, even if you lose, it's not too bad where, an early upset might define a season. So they get Collingwood as their only away game at Gather Round. Wait, what?
That doesn't
Sorry, they
sound
get
right.
their one game against Collingwood at Gather Round away.
Oh, yeah.
So they're one of the few teams that actually get, to play Collingwood outside of Melbourne, which is nice. And they play Essendon and North. And as considering they finish in the top two, like those two gets for double up matchup, I think it's really decent. Again, the hardest trip in the first half of the season will be Freo Optus before, as I said, it sort of gets half in the back half of the season. But for a new coach, that early half of the fixture is really good just to build up that momentum.
Yeah.
Because, they already got the framework. So it just builds up that belief for them. You know what I mean? Like, that things don't go wrong early. You get a few wins. Even if they do drop a bit like last year, they'll at least have the confidence that they can play really good football. And I think that they should have a good early first half of the season.
Yeah, 100%.
Uh,
Like as we've already kind of just gone over, they have a great list, and they have this ton of experience. That there's no reason for them not to drop out of finals. Like unless they suddenly get dealt with what Richmond got dealt with and just have a ton of injuries.
Yeah.
There's no reason for them. There's no reason for them to fall out of finals.
And this is where I'm sort of going with reason for pessimism, because I will say, when I was talking about luckiness earlier, and I mentioned the X scores and all that, like, again, I'm not too worried about that. But then you couple it with this other thing, which was Sydney were also the healthiest list in 2024. And you know what I mean? And then you're like, did Sydney get a bit lucky? Because at the end of the day, they finished a fairly low win rate for a minor premier, which is 17-6. Normally you're seeing a bit more 19 wins, only 4 losses, all that sort of stuff. They had a nearly clear run within injury, and they had a pretty low percentage for minor premiers. So if they had a normal bit of injury, would Sydney just have been a good team? And that's the question. And I don't have an answer for that. But the statistics say, and we saw it a bit when they got injured a bit last season, some of the friendship players, I mentioned this in the next point, so I'll just go into it. With the lowest amount of unique players, the talent sort of waned in Sydney's list, and it even came through in 2024.
Yeah.
And they will need to replace Parker with, a mid-talent or an untested debutant. And they still have a lot of list clockers that sort of went out of favour. I'm talking about Peter Labbins, Roy Fox. Great 2024 grand final, though. Aaron Francis, people forgetting he plays there. And even possibly Taylor Adams. Can't believe we're putting him in this sort of area. After,
I know. And but I also agree with you with the fact that, like, he's a great player. We know he's a great player. But when you look at the midfield that Sydney have, how do you break into that?
Yeah, and it's just, as I said, he was definitely out of favour because, as I said, they were playing Robbie Fox in the grand final over him. You know what I mean? So, like, they weren't even pushing him in the forward line trying to make room for him. So, it's just one of those weird things where, as I said, and, I also mentioned it, they've got players like the other Warner, what's his name? Corey?
Corey,
I
yeah.
think so.
Chad Warner's the big
Yeah,
one.
Corey
Corey
Warner.
Warner's the other one.
Yeah, big drop off, sort of player. There's a few others that, just didn't look that great when they were on the park. So they're they are a very best 15 sort of team. You know what I mean? Um, uh, Possibly the best 15 in the league, mind you. But you know what I mean? You take a few out of the equation, maybe one of those turns into a long-term injury, and you're asking a few questions. You know what I mean? Um, but yeah,
Probably one of
and
the biggest
finally,
ones out of that big 15 would be their ruckman at the moment. They don't really have an ideal backup.
oh man, they could put in Laddams again. It's never my favorite Port player. Um, yeah, just not a very high IQ person. Um,
Well, he played for
Maybe in
Port, so I
general,
wonder.
especially in football terms. Huh?
He played for Port, so I wonder.
Oh, wow. Classism. Typical Melbourner. Looking down on the working class South Australian
No, it's
Perth.
just Port Adelaide. Adelaide are maybe a
Oh,
little bit higher.
okay. Maybe. I get you there. I get you.
All right, go on.
And
Next
yeah,
point.
and the last point is just like, I know it's a bit speculative, but they're gonna hope that the midfield touch doesn't dry up because it is the generator for Sydney.
Hmm.
Because any loss in stoppage, any midfield based score involvement, or even direct goals, as I mentioned, their midfielders and mid forwards kicked 140 of their 364 goals last season, which is roughly 38%. And I didn't go through this for every other list, but 38 is pretty damn high. You know
That
what I
is.
mean? So that gets limited, and you've got a young forward line and a transitioning defense that get a bit more exposed if Sydney don't dominate like they did in areas in 2024. Because, I'm not saying it's going to change because they have so much talent there, but weird things happen sometimes when you get a new coach. So hopefully it's stable. But again, this is like a worst case scenario for Sydney. And I think
100%.
the worst thing that could happen to Sydney is their midfield somehow fraps themselves.
Well, yeah, it's either they just fall out of form or they fall down with injury. That's pretty much the two main options.
Yeah. So going on to the verdict, yeah, a few people are sensing a bit of a drop off. I don't think I'm the only one. But I think some of it's a bit of a shallow assessment, purely based off last year's grand final. Because while that was bad, like you got to ask yourself why. And again, when you look into the stats, there's some pretty clear reasons why.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where with a new coach, maybe some of those things get patched up. And I feel like, you know what I mean? Like maybe, you're looking at the upper end, but I still think it's just like a lot to ask to adjust and stay on that. Because I think, while I do think Sydney were a bit lucky, I think this is like going from first to like third, fourth, or fifth. You know what I mean? And there wasn't that much difference between them.
Mm-hmm.
So I haven't put them in the top two contention. I don't think their list has quite enough depth as Geelong and Brisbane to put them in that mix. But I will say that, third to ninth, maybe, you know, um, I don't know. Maybe it's a bit harsh saying they could drop out the eight, but I feel like it's possible. Just because the depth is so poor. But my gut feel, I've put him at seventh, and I think that's even a bit not pessimistic. But you know what I mean? Like it seems a bit harsh, but when you look at the quality teams above them, you know what I mean? It's just like they'll be in the mix. I don't think they're that much in a tier different from Port, GWS, Hawthorn, Fremantle, Sydney. In fact, I would group those teams together
Yeah, they're all
in like a
extremely close.
form
It's
ranking.
minor numbers that differentiate them.
Yeah. And as I said, Collingwood, I think will do well, but you know what I mean? It's like, I'm not expecting them to go to the higher region. Like I said, I think eighth is actually one of the higher spots I had for them. Carlton, again, a bit variable, so on and so forth. So
Yeah.
Sydney are like still in the good group. Pessimistically, I've ranked them seventh, but again, as I said, Hawthorn, Dockers, Port Adelaide, GWS is around about where they're at. There's not much difference between them.
Yeah, it's going to be like maybe maybe a game and a half difference for the most part, and just purely based on percentage as well. Like it's
Yeah,
extremely
exactly.
minor details.
Yep.
Right.
But again, I'm a cow, so I didn't put him as a lock. So
Yeah.
you can
There's
be
there's a
careful.
possible chance, but I don't see them dropping out of finals just yet.
Yeah, as I said, it would take a lot of. Well, it would take a normal amount of injuries. It would just have to be in key areas. Like as I
Yeah.
said, their key would be the main thing.
Keybacks, maybe their ruck. I
Yeah,
could see their
ruck
forward line
midfield.
probably being okay just because of their midfield depth, being able to rotate fairly well.
Yeah, exactly. Like they could lose a toll because they don't even run off their tolls anyway. Papley might be the biggest one, I'd say. Like, just because he keeps it going, like he's the most offensively based small forward now that Parker's gone,
Mm.
so who knows.
Yeah, pretty much. All right, next on the list is a team that we both enjoy, but has kind of waned in terms of performance over the past few years, even though they did make finals in 2024, and that is the Western Bulldogs. Look at that little bulldog.
Yes. Rest
The
in peace, Sid.
I
The
know,
original. Well, not original, but
like one
the
of
one
the
I grew up with.
one of the few OGs.
Yeah.
Because you gotta rotate every couple of years.
Yeah, exactly.
When you have an
Like,
animal mascot that actually exists, it kind of
yeah.
is the
And
case.
they normally take good care of him. Yeah, as I said. Uh always think with Bulldogs, like I'm pretty sure they get them adopted as well, because obviously with the
Yeah,
little short noses, they're not technically meant to have them. So again, if you're listening to this, Coast to Coast PSA, don't buy bred Bulldogs. If you really want them with the short face, go get them adopted.
adopt,
You
don't
know,
shop. Amen.
yeah, exactly. I mean that's just good in general, but especially with a breed like the Bulldogs,
100%.
or have a long nose one. We are also cute. Long nose Bulldogs also cute.
Majority of dogs are cute, unless they're like
Yeah.
chihuahuas. We can get rid of them.
Bontempelli though, what a cutie.
Absolutely. Well, we might not talk about him that much, to be honest, but he is a cutie.
Yeah,
All right.
very
So
important player.
there was a lot of noise at the start of 2024. Most of you are probably already aware that a lot of Bulldogs fans wanted Luke Beveridge out, and this has kind of been a thing for past 2 years. I would say there's kind of just the waning performances of the Dogs. They've been up and they've been
And
down.
Hinkley light.
They've been up and they've been down. But there were also multiple rumors of player movements coming at the end of the season, specifically with eyes on Bailey Smith, as he was eyed to go to Geelong, which obviously ended up happening. But like St Kilda, the Dogs season was extremely inconsistent. By the bye round, the Dogs were 7-7, with the round one loss to Demons. Then they had a win against the Suns and a win against the Eagles, two low-rated teams. Then they lost against the Cats and the Bombers when the Essendon edge was still kind of there. And then they beat they beat the Saints. They lost to the Dockers. They lost to the Hawks, and obviously they beat Richmond as well. And then the Giants, and the Swans, and the Magpies, and sorry, I am missing two, and the Lions, and they lost to the Lions, and they beat the Dockers before their bye, which is how they ended up 7-7. Post bye, they had a pretty strong run home. So they went 7-2 and made the top 8 with clean wins against Carlton, Geelong, and Sydney. Geelong especially was the kind of the surprising one out of the three. Because Carlton and Sydney both at the time, well, Sydney were already, as we just talked about, they started having holes in the second half of their season. Carlton had a couple of runs with injury at that time as well. So Geelong was kind of the big one that really surprised everyone. And they lost only to both South Australian teams, being Adelaide and Port Adelaide. And then they just got cleanly knocked out by Hawthorn on their elimination final. But at the end of the day, you can at least say the Bulldogs didn't take things by half measure, with only 6 margins for the year under 20 points and 11 margins over 40. Which, when they knew how to blow out a team, they knew how to blow out a team. But sometimes they just couldn't help but keep it close.
No, the opposite.
Is it? Oh yeah, it is the opposite. Don't mind.
The feast of famine. Sorry, that was my note. I sort of added it in there because I when I was going through the stats, I sort of noticed how either really, really big or really, really always really, really big. It's just they won or they lost.
Yeah.
There's only a few small margins. So I think it was 4 margins under 20. I can't remember. So.
The biggest win that they had was a 96-point win against the Roos.
Mm.
which I
Oh,
don't
that's
think.
fine.
Yeah, and then the second
They
biggest
just
was the
need to
91
lose,
point win
yeah.
against the Tigers, but we'll ignore that.
Mm. Yeah.
But otherwise,
You
yeah,
know,
most of the games were fairly close, either a win or a loss margin, somewhere between 30 and 40 points, or it was like between like 5 to 10 points.
I wouldn't say like 30 or 40 is fairly close.
No,
That's like
well,
blowout territory for
yeah,
me.
that is a little bit of a blow. So it would have been like
Yeah.
they were all very similar margins essentially.
Yeah. And that's what I was sort of going. And that's what I was like trying to get set up because, again, I'll take over the stats from here. Is that the Bulldogs, very, very, very good, except for the stats that they're not good at. So goals, again, Bulldogs are a very forward half team. So a lot of these stuff reflects that. Um, Fifth for goals, 13.4. Shots, second in the league, 28.5.
Mm-hmm.
But again, so are the opposite from Sydney. They were very bad at converting. Accuracy at 46.9, which is 15th in the league, despite having the third best X score per shot at 3.34. And this is where I said the swing was. X score per set shot, 3.75. So they were first and in that and shooting at 15th accuracy. Well, as I said, Sydney had 3.01 and were had the first mate accuracy in the league. So a bit of swings and roundabouts there. Inside 50s, though, first in the league, 56.6 a game. Goals per inside 50, again with a bad accuracy, a bit lower, 23.6, which is 10th. But that evens out a bit with shots per inside 50, which is 50.3 with
Mm-hmm.
4th. And set shots per inside 50, which is 46.2 at 5th. Forward half score, one of the best in the league, just below Sydney at 47. Centre bounce score, second in the league, obviously with that midfield, 13.8 from there. Second in the league. Stoppage score, really, really high. So absolutely fantastic with a bowl up, 38 in second. And they got a lot of tackles inside 50. So as you can imagine, with a high stoppage score, they were getting a lot from these. So tackles were 12.2 at second in the league,
Mm-hmm.
and inside 50 ground ball gets, not surprisingly, first in the league at 19.3. But it's very surprising to me, with the forwards like Norton, Waitman, who's an all right inside 50 mark. You've just got now son of a gun,
Ugle Hagen.
Sam Darcy,
Sam
or
Darcy as
Ugle
well.
Hagen, who's not son of a gun, but I know what you mean. Mark inside 50 rate is 21.7 at 13th in the league, which is a lot lower than I thought, but it sort of makes sense with how the Bulldogs play. They were more concerned about getting inside 50 rather than making it clean because they were so good at ground level.
Yeah.
And, part of the reason, with that, say a few botch entries and a lot of behinds, opposition rebound rate found that fairly easy, 75.6, which is 12. But overall, though, this is a very good offense, just marred by inaccuracy. And, it's really set shots. Like, I'm not really a team where a person that's like, oh, good kicking, that will destroy a team. I still think generally more shots will get you the win. But the Bulldogs, and I mentioned this when I did my little breakdown of them mid-year last year,
Mm-hmm.
is that, and I'll sort of talk about this with movement, but I'll talk about it in defense, which I'll go to next. That sort of leans to some of their weakness because in defense, points against, they did really good. Tied fifth in the league, 11.2. So on paper, fantastic. Opposition shots, 22.3, second in the league, fantastic. Opposition's inside 50, 47.2, first in the league, fantastic. So the points against, whilst really good, you got to keep in mind they did not let the opposition inside 50. But once it did get in there, opposition goal per inside 50, 23.8, 14th in the league. Opposition score per inside 50, 47.4, 11th in the league. Opposition X score per shot, 3.31, which is tied 15th worst. So oppositions were taking easier score. As I mentioned, technically they had slightly harder shots than the Bulldogs were taking, but still getting a lot more goals out of them,
Mm-hmm.
which is again where accuracy really takes a hold. Mark inside 50 rate for oppositions, 24.6, which is 15th in the league. So opposition scores a lot of marks inside 50. Opposition rebound 50. Oh, sorry. Bulldogs rebound 50 rate, 74.4, 14th in the league. So the Bulldogs weren't getting the ball out of defense. So a lot of them were going to goals when they were in there. Opposition in sub 50 ground ball get, though. They were very good at lower level, so 12.9 third. Very bad on the defensive one-on-ones. Lost 30.4%, which is fourth. 14th, even though they had the fourth. Actually, no, I think I've just made a mistake there. I'm pretty sure that's actually, what would that be, 15th at 9.4. So they weren't giving away many defensive one-on-ones. I'll have to double check that. But
That's all good.
where they were really good with the opposition score of forward half, defending that, which is 35.9, which is third. Opposition score from centre bounce, which is 9.1, which is third. And I didn't realise I did actually put this in movement stats. But again, this is where the bad kicking came in. Off defensive half, opponents could move the ball upfield and score against them from those inaccurate shots. They were tied 12th from leaking opposition scores from defensive half, which I have conveniently not put in there. I will look that for you now. Where are we at? Score origin defensive half opposition score. That is 32.8 per game. Raw score. 0.8. So they're almost giving up as much from the defensive half as the forward half, which normally you see forward half being a better. For most teams, forward half generation is, king. That's just what we're seeing in this league. So, they just get exposed on the back line. So this is really where feast or famine come in, because on average, these are really good. When you look at the stats, though, like so many of these are really, really comprehensively winning.
Yeah.
Or they get smacked in some games. So overall, disposal really good, third in the league. Disposal efficiency really good, 37.4, fifth in the league. Disposal differential, they normally get 18 more than their opponents, which is sixth in the league. Meters gain differential, 204.1, which is fourth in the league. So that's 204 meters more than your opponents. Their kick percentage is very low. They choose to handball a lot more, 58.5, 13th in the league. Meters per disposal follow seat, so very short possessions. 15.2 meters per disposal is tied 12th in the league. Inside 50 differential, though, where they absolutely dominant. And this is a horrendously high one. I think the next best is 4 or something like that. But they're 9.5 more inside 50s than their opponents.
And
also, no, Brisbane was also up there, but then it drops off for Hawthorn, which is 6.4.
Oh, yeah. But I mean, that's the inside 50 differential being 9.5, tying that into the fact that on average they had 56.6 inside 50s per match is insane. It's just, it's just unlucky that their conversion was so bad.
Yeah, like they had the, and look, as I said, like they were first in both. Like they had the most inside 50s and they had the most inside 50s denied, or like least amount against them. So it was not just that they were getting a ridiculous amount of them; it's that they were playing by the wings. They weren't playing like Civ sort of midfield, like sacrificing a lot of clearances against her or all that. Like no, they still had solid structure. Like they're.
And you're about to go about it with the rest of the stats, but that goes a massive credit to their midfield.
Yeah, and it, as I said, their outside movement forward wasn't that great, but defensively, a lot of teams, that go really aggressive, try and win the clearance, but if they lose it, they lose in the post-contested stats. Like I mentioned with Freo, like I mentioned, I think it was with, no, it wasn't Cheeto Voice. I think it might have been Port, actually. So, but the Bulldogs, fairly well on track with that. So, again, offensively, best midfield by far. Like, number one offensive generating midfield, undisputed in my opinion. And I'll go through them. They also like to control the marking, 97.5, which is fourth in the league. Contested mark, first in the league. While a chunk of that did come from the forwards, it was very mixed as well. There was a lot actually on the wing and a lot from defense. So I put that as a movement stat because it was all over the ground. Intercept possession differential, 1.8 gain, which is tied fifth in the league. Clearance differential, 3.5 more than your opponents, which is third in the league. Ground ball get differential, 4, which is tied sixth. Just pure 6 in the league, sorry. So as I mentioned, the only other stat that's poor in the Bulldogs in that area is the opposition the opposition ruck percentage wins. But I just put it in there because it's like Team English, he plays as another midfielder. So despite really being the worst tap ruckman in the league, I was actually surprised he wins less ruck hitouts than by win percentage than Bailey Williams, who we might talk about a bit later. That's for the Eagles, if you don't know.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah, because there's Bailey
definitely
Williams
like
and
the
there's
17th.
BJ Williams, right?
Yeah, yeah, and like Bailey Williams, like even he would probably agree. Probably the 18th ruckman in the league. You know, a bit young, but still got more ruck win percents than Team English.
But
So
that goes to
it's just
show
a bit
that
of a-
it doesn't always have to be about the ruckman. Because
yeah, exactly.
Nankervis early on, despite predominantly being a ruckman, was played very similarly. He played more so as just another midfielder rather than as a pure ruck.
Yeah, exactly. Because I don't think his hitouts to advantage was as high as they have been um, by memory. But yeah, no, as I mean, so you know, I will say, and you can't really see this from these stats. As I mentioned, though, that outside movement, you know, they were just really bad. They didn't score at all from defensive half, and they allowed oppositions to score so much. So while there's not many red stats, the fact that they connect so heavily together and are interchanged. So the Bulldogs, 100% stoppage team, but if they can't get those stoppages, the opponents score so easily, which is why we have the swing there. It's open, everyone can see it. It's just this year, how much is that going to affect them? You know, obviously we saw them come back, get some very good win against very good teams, but got them into a hole early. So it's like, what's going to happen this year? Are they going to try and patch that up, or are they going to continue being that hyper aggressive forward half team? And I'm not really too sure, to be honest.
Yeah, neither am I. And like, despite the fact that we know that that their midfield, as seen by a lot of these stats, and the fact that as I just mentioned, like it doesn't matter if your ruck is quote unquote bad. Obviously, we know that Tim English isn't bad. Um,
Yeah, exactly.
but like in terms of in terms of the
Statistically,
matchup,
rock stats are
yeah, yeah,
bad.
yeah. Like the
Yeah.
fact that your midfield is so good that you're generating so much inside 50s and so many opportunities to score. It's just about relying maybe a little too much on that forward line to convert, and maybe they need their midfielders to. Oh, I wouldn't say need their midfielders to step up a little bit more in terms of score, because it should be on the
Yeah.
forward line to actually do a lot more. Where it's literally it's literally the opposite for Sydney, whereas their midfielders
Yeah.
do too much.
Yeah, and I think it's also the one of the things where, again, scoring from turnovers, you know what I mean? Like, it was decent for the Dogs, but I feel like, again, those are sort of like the easier shots, because I feel like the Dogs, again, they get a lot of good set shots, but again, they're from general sort of play, you know, a
Yeah,
lot of free kicks, you know, a lot of, obviously, tackles inside 50 resulting in free kicks, a lot of pressure. But you know what I mean? Like, they don't have as much breakaway. Their one-on-one stats, I didn't put them in there, but they were just solid. You know what I mean? I think they were like, you know, um, still on the upper half, but you know what I mean? The scores from turnover, definitely could have been a tiny bit better, and maybe where they see a bit more avenue. You know, well, there you go. St Kilda got more score off turnover than the Bulldogs, but that's also fairly high. So
yeah.
they scored 50. So, you know, it's high, but not like highest in the league. And I think they really need to generate that, you know, because defensive half is so poor. And they're probably not going to fix it with the list changes that they've made this year.
No, likely not. So let's move on to that. So I'll start with the ins. They received Matt Kennedy from Carlton. Um, this was kind of a big one because I kind of mentioned in in the new faces bit that Matt Kennedy was kind of playing as like the third or fourth sort of big midfielder after like Patrick Cripps and Sam Walsh at Carlton. So it's kind of surprising to see him go whenever one of those two were injured, he was kind of the one that stepped up. Um, but I mean, more benefit to the Dogs when you lose Bailey Smith, Caleb Daniel, and Jack McRae, which I will talk a little bit more depth on in a moment.
Mm.
And then out of their draft picks, they got a fairly decent hand. Pick 20, Cooper Hines. Pick 29, Lockie Jacques. Pick 31, Josh Dolan. Pick 51, Sam Davidson. And pick 62, Luke Kennedy. I don't know if you put it like what the kind of players they are in any of this, but I've got no idea.
Yeah, I got no idea too.
So, I mean, I guess we'll find out once all the statistics and stuff are uploaded to the websites.
When it comes near to round 1 and we see some of these new faces, we'll talk more about them.
Yeah, for sure. And then onto the outs, as I just mentioned, Jack McRae was traded to St Kilda. Caleb Daniel went to North Melbourne, and Bailey Smith, the big one, went to Geelong. He was out for pretty much the whole season. Actually, I'm pretty sure he was out for the whole season.
Injury.
With an injury, and then there was a lot of talk that he just wasn't really happy at the Dogs anyway. Wanted to change of scenery. Geelong was the big one who was kind of on him all season long, and he ended up going where he wanted to go. So credit to him.
For the brand.
Yeah, exactly right.
Well,
he's got a bit of a reputation now that he needs to shake off.
I should mention, AFL Coast to Coast do not believe in conspiracies involving, trade deal, marketing things, farmland distributed for players that have done by Geelong. And this is purely for comedic purposes.
Yeah, we're not being entirely serious with these jokes. Caleb Daniel, he was kind of pushed out of the Dogs' best 22. Couldn't really find himself in a stable position. Kind of ended up being the sub a fair amount of times, and he just wasn't happy with it.
Awkwardly put in the forward line as well.
Yeah, that too. So North snapped him up for his experience and his I would say leadership qualities, but he is more of a quieter player. But he's going to be very helpful for their depth, as well as again just that experience in general. Jack McRae to St Kilda. We did talk about this a little bit when we talked about St Kilda, but I think he's going to try and just it's just more experience for St Kilda just in the long run, because he's a great player, we know that, but it's just about doing more because St Kilda need more.
Yeah,
put it simply.
And he's only 32. For some reason, people are saying Jack McRae veteran and all that.
I mean, he is 30 is veteran classed.
Ish. He's still got a lot of tank. He's still in his prime.
12 years in the system is veteran.
I know, but...
Well, that's if he was drafted at 18, which I'm pretty sure he was.
I will say, tangent, but in 2018, in Supercoach, I was doing a lot of analysis for that sort of stuff. Same way I nerd out on here.
Mm-hmm.
And I was looking through it, and I just saw everyone was like, "Oh, Bontempelli in my team, Bontempelli in my team." And then,
well, why would you not? It's Bontempelli.
Yeah. Well, this is actually a bit before he got Supercoach consistent. He would have these games where it would drop off a bit more. Again, 2017, 2018, I can't remember the year. But yeah, and then I wrote I gave a lot of advice. Telling people Jack McRae, I know he plays wing, but his playing wing, he's just outside of top 10 midfielder, and he seems to be getting more and more involved. Put him in, and foolishly, I ended up not putting him in my team, and he ended up being the number 1 scorer for the first half of 2018. So I got other people onto him. I didn't add him.
You didn't trust your own gut, but everyone else trusted your gut.
No, I don't know if anyone else trusted my gut. I might have got Jack McRae. I think my friend put him in, because I got him into early. He didn't have him in the initial team, but he traded him in after a couple of weeks. So yeah, swings and roundabouts. But
I mean, hey,
that's my Jack McRae story.
First in Kilda, he's just another Jack to add to their list.
Exactly.
And that's 3 of them in the midfield now. Well, if you count, Sinclair kind of rotating both, but yeah. They're delisted players: Dominic Bedendo, Charlie Clark, and Kelsey Ripstra. I really like that last name. I don't know why.
Yeah, I was going to say, a couple of really good names gone for them.
And then retired Aiden O'Driscoll and Alex Keith. Alex Keith being the big one. He was kind of he'd been there a long time, been in the system a long time. It's just injuries just really kind of forced him out, which is really unlucky.
And obviously, Aiden was announced. Was it before the season or just on it? But
Yeah, it was very, very
history
early.
of concussion, never got a hang of it. And I actually know he is back in WA. I talked to the person who gave him physio, um, sort of in touch with that sort of thing. So he's now working as a sports, I think it's like sports recruitment or something along that side. So
Oh yeah,
yeah.
that's pretty
So
cool.
unfortunately, as I said, injury obviously is related to Aiden Idris. Yeah, of course, it's related to Aiden Idris school, but oh no, I'm complete getting both of the Idris schools, Emma and I don't know who the guy is.
Isn't it the one at
Um,
Freo?
yeah, Driscoll. I just always call him Driscoll. So what's his name? Nathan. Nathan.
Snapper's going to be really upset with you that you keep forgetting.
Oh, it's all right. It's halfway in the podcast. You might not pay attention.
Yeah, it's true. The only person who's really focusing on the dog section is probably Soof. Let's be honest.
We might get leaks. See if you hear this, don't leak us to Snap. We're innocent.
All right, let's jump
Uh,
over to the important players, the players that we want to highlight for the 2025 season. So I'm going to start with the former number one draft pick in Jamara Ugle-Hagan. He's pretty much ready to have another strong breakout season because we already know he's really good and he's been highlighted multiple times. But last year, whilst his stats were good, he did he was kind of down on his overall stats compared to seasons like his 1 or 2 seasons prior.
I'll say consistency. Like if the Bulldogs had a crack game, it was probably Jamara Eaglehagen only kicked a goal, if that.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm expecting him to have a much better, much stronger season this year. He averaged 11.4 disposals, 2 goals, and 4.4 marks over 22 games last season. His accuracy could use some work because I think it was like below 40%, or it's like between 40 to 45%.
Yeah,
It was
it
very
was
low.
him and Norton that were the main offenders of their accuracy.
Yeah.
Vandermeer
But he has
too,
ample
but
assistance
that
up
was more
forward
ground level.
in regards to supply from his smaller forwards, like in Riley West, Cody Waitman, who's unfortunately now injured. Um,
Just announced before the podcast,
yeah, he's
unfortunately.
going to be out for
He'll
the
be out for
first
a few months.
3 months, which is rough.
Yeah.
And Vandermeer as well. So, well, you can take out Waitman in that regard just for the first couple of months, but we know that obviously they've got really good small forward pressure. It's just about being consistent enough to feed the supply to Ugle-Hagan and the other tall forwards, and hopefully their accuracy will be good enough this season to really make use of that supply.
Yeah, and like a lot of that, and I think it's like the most understated thing about the doggies is that their forward line's still very young.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like Waitman's not very old. Norton's still only 26. Like I think his development, he's probably the player where I'm like, starting to get to the point where I'm probably not that excited by him anymore. But obviously Ugle Hagen, like he's athletic. He just needs like a tiny bit more muscle, I think, just to get those marks consistent. And then, as I said, we've seen his marks on lead is pretty good. It's just finding that avenue for more contested marks, when he's not getting, um, you know, or, matching the sort of supply that the Bulldogs sometimes give that are more dump kicks, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
You can take a few more marks from them. They're not the optimal ones, but, all it takes is a couple. And then you're making a really good offense into a fantastic
yeah, exactly
offense.
right. Because we know he's got great hands. It's just about keeping that, like,
Yeah.
being more consistent with it.
And
And
as I said, like the great hands of young son of a gun,
Sam Darcy.
I know his name already, Sam Darcy. Like his really good hands, and that's deep. So you got two hands that are really, really good, and you can spread them out,
Yeah, exactly
which
right.
really makes defenses worry. So,
Yeah,
we're not going to put the pressure on Sam. So we're going to say Ugle Hagen, take that forward line
Sam's
and
a
make
little
it
bit
your
younger
own.
than Ugle-Hagan, so he can get a break.
Exactly.
There was something else I was going to briefly mention, and I've already forgotten about it. So we'll move on. Next
Yeah.
is Rory Lobb, who was initially brought in by the Dogs as a key forward slash ruck, but it made the transition to key defender late in the season due to injury. And so far, from what we've seen, it was a very successful move. Sorry, I had to cough. He averaged 13.6 disposals, 2.1 tackles, 2.9 spoils, and 2.4 intercept marks across 16 games, give or take which ones he played forward and which he played back.
Yeah, I think it was like 3 games forward or something like that.
Yeah, because he was very in and out in that forward line until they needed to
Yeah.
make that call.
Yeah.
With Liam Jones missing the start of 2025, the Doggies will be hoping his defensive smarts improve as he gets used to being key defender number one, and that is very true. Especially with Buku Kamas and a couple of other younger guys back there still trying to find their solid feet.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think yeah, they got a couple that they might slot out this year because it's very young down there. It's like what's his name, like Buslinger or something like that. I've seen his name pop up a few times.
I was scrolling through their lists when I was writing this up, and there was a couple that kind of looked very young to me that I wasn't really sure of.
Yeah, exactly. So you see those names for up, but like, as I said, it's gonna be, and I'm not saying like he isn't, because I actually thought it was amazing how good he was at reading. But I think people forget that like reading as a spare man defender is a lot different than being a key, because key defender, like locking onto your man, like you really got to be disciplined as well, because that's when you get more holding calls. That's when you sort of can't get loose as much. So, hopefully they'll work on this off season. It happened early, so they've got months to prepare. And hopefully, as long as he, does his rounds, continues on, it's gonna hurt. But as I said, Rory Lobb will still probably have a decent output, even if he does change that role a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we've talked about with other teams, there's nothing wrong with having a swing player. Like, Rory Lobb might end up finding a permanent home in the backline, and that's definitely a good thing for the Dogs. But if for whatever reason they desperately need him back up forward, he can do that. That's the benefit of being, trained in both sides of the ground.
Yeah, and as I said, even this position like adds to his utility because it's like the Pierce Ryan situation which I mentioned earlier, where if you've got like an injured player, because let's face it, Liam Jones is getting pretty old and he was never the most durable player, but you know what I mean? It's like if Rory Lobb can take over, it makes them a bit more versatile for the upcoming years.
Yeah, exactly right. Speaking of old, Tom Liberatore, he's 32. Fun fact. I didn't realize he was 32. But despite some concerning health issues in the middle of the season, he still has the tank and the strength to perform through the middle. He averaged 23.8 disposals, 5.6 tackles, and 7.8 clearances across 18 games in 2024. Honestly, when he's on the park, when he's 100% fit, he's still probably like top 10, one of the best midfielders in the league.
Oh, statistic-wise for his role, absolutely. Like, and it's sort of hard because, obviously Bontempelli has his sort of role, but, when you look at the stats, you can see, like, the areas that Tom Liberatore excels in terms of the consistent stuff, it's all elite.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
It's exactly what I saw when I looked at his stats.
Exactly. His disposal, it's a bit average, but they've got Bont to, add that bit of class.
And they've got Treloar
as
there
long
as
as he
well.
gets the handball out. Exactly. They've got a lot of good distributors. So to have that really hard person in Tom Liberatore, and I still think he can do it a lot this year because his numbers really haven't gone down. Like, honestly, any year that Tom Liberatore plays, I remember after his second or third ACL, I just thought, oh, this is going to be a career that never happens. And then, like, for the last at least 4 or 5 years, it's been pretty solid. And, absolutely
the Dogs.
I love seeing him play.
After the 2016 Premiership, the Dogs did have that little bit of a dip between 17 and 18. And then, as 2019 and then through the whatchamacallit, the pandemic years, like the Dogs started stepping up a bit more. And obviously that they've dropped a little bit now, but they're still in that sort of form. They're still sort of in that position where we know they're good, and when they're on the park, they're really good. But again, they tend to slip in places they shouldn't.
Exactly, but it's just so good to have these veterans still adding a weight of numbers, and that just makes them able to play their game plan week in, week out. So
yeah, absolutely.
I think Tom Liberatore is still one of the more important pieces, if not I would say the, considering the way they play. Like, if they didn't have contestedness, like, the Bulldogs would just not be functional. So,
Yeah, 100%.
very
Like
important player.
as much as you don't wanna see him be injured or have the same health concerns that he did last
Mm,
season. Like I hope the Dogs are planning for having a ready replacement for him in due time. Because again, he's 32. Like he
yeah,
hasn't got that much longer left of a
exactly.
career.
And the history. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I know what you mean.
And then last on our important players list, and you wanted me to talk about him, is Joel Freyer, who is a rebounding defender. The Bulldogs' halfback rebounding game was pretty much Bailey Dale, but in the back half of 2024, they found a gem of a player from that year. Led the team in intercept possessions from halfback, and only Liam Jones is ahead, including the key defenders. Great ball use, and for a rookie, very even across the board, so a bit more time on ground, and he makes a bigger impact in 2025, continuing his form.
Yeah, as I said, not really like in the Rising Star mix because he did play so late, but he was absolutely fantastic, I thought. And as I said, it was just because, as I said, like this very much could be Bell. I'm sure if Blaze was writing it, it's just he was a bit busy on the weekend, so I sort of finished this off for him. Um, but yeah, I think he would have written Bailey Dale, and I was thinking about it, but then I just
No, I
felt like
probably
it'd
I
be
probably would
to
have gone
mention
with
him.
someone else's because everyone. It's like it's the same reason why I didn't write Bontempelli. Is that like they
I
get
mean, yeah,
they are the more highlighted players in that team.
yeah, exactly. As I said, like sometimes you got to talk about like Eagle Hagen because obviously, you know, forward line is a very important part of the Bulldogs. But yeah, I also thought just to round it out because yeah, as I said, a movement sort of defender. Um, but yeah, as I said, like as I mentioned, like the Bulldogs are very like I said, you got Joel Freer, you got Bailey Dale, but remember they were playing players like James Harms,
Yeah,
Lockie Bramble, that was very variable,
yeah,
Taylor DeRay, who fell off a cliff again.
yeah.
So, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, you're getting very thin unless they're going to play another rookie. I think it will be a lot of Joel Freer and Bailey Dale.
Do you know how old
There's a
Freer
few on the
is? Is
wing.
he like 18, 19?
I think it's 19.
Okay,
So
then
turning
he's still
20
very
this
much
year.
eligible for the Rising Star and could still have a fair shot at it
Yeah,
this
maybe.
this season.
Yeah. There's another few players that they're chucking on the wing as well. Like, I mean, Freer technically did go there a bit. I still class him as a defender, but like Harvey Gallagher as
Mm.
well. Um, sometimes I think Riley Garcia even sometimes played on the wing.
Yeah,
So, they've got that forward half rotation, but I think Joel Freer just adds that defensive bit that they were missing. So
yeah, yeah.
they would have wanted to improve on some of those defensive stats. And no, he's not a real defender. Real defender? He's not a lockdown defender. But Joel Freer, in a scheme of things, in terms of getting that rebound better, will help their defense, all things said and done.
Yeah, 100%. All right, they're new faces, and there was only one because it was a trade. Because we don't know all that much about their recruits. So Matt Kennedy, he's an inside mid or a high half forward. The former Giant turned blue, joined the Kennel at the end of the trade period. A big-bodied midfielder who was a solid performer in Carlton's midfield behind Patrick Cripps, Sam Walsh, Adam Chera, and George Hewitt. It was kind of you can probably swap Hewitt and Kennedy around for the most part. They were kind of the same
Oh
sort
no,
of.
I was talking about in terms of pure centre bounces
Oh
and
yeah,
Kennedy.
yeah,
I think I phrased this a bit wrong. I was just saying this year he got shifted more towards half forward.
yeah. He did because that midfield did get pretty packed at the end of the day. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, as he played half forward as a link between midfield and the forward 50, he averaged 17.7 disposals, 4.4 marks, 3.4 tackles, and 2.1 clearances across pretty much all 24 games in
Mm.
2024. I think it was only, yeah, because obviously they didn't play opening round. They didn't, obviously, they had a bye as well. I
Mm.
think he played, actually, he did play genuinely every game of the season because it's
Yeah,
23 in
because
the
it's
season, not including
23
opening
games and
round and the
then yeah,
bye
at the
and the final.
yeah.
So that's extremely
Uh,
consistent for the like.
Yeah, and honestly, I think he's a fairly good player. Like, it's just role for him that's always a bit undefined. And I know going to the Bulldogs isn't great for that,
No,
which is
it's
where I have
not.
some reservations. But he does fit the profile. Again, sort of like Luke Parker with the Swans. Matt Kennedy is pretty much like that inside mid that can play high half forward. And, very offensively minded. Conversion, if he could kick straight, he could just play in the forward line. but that's where he needs that inside midfielder because he needs to play high.
Yeah.
Because he's a good mark, he just can't convert that well from set shots. So, again, probably not what the Dogs want to hear, but he'll provide link, and again, he'll provide that kick to an inside 50 mark that might get a goal.
Yeah, exactly right.
That's
And
sort of what
he'll also just be part of that, Liberatore, Trelaw sort of rotation.
Yeah, exactly. And especially if an injury comes, you know what I mean? Like, they need some depth, so, the worst case scenarios don't happen for them.
Yeah, exactly. All right, reasons for optimism. There is no doubt the Bulldogs are one of the most threatening teams in the league if they can get their game style going, and next to no team is going to compete with their inside midfield with the likes of Bont, Libba, and Trelaw. Ed Richards and Riley Sanders and the newly acquired Matt Kennedy all can assist, and there is no reason why their midfield line can't maintain in 2025. And that's exactly right. It's literally what we were just talking about, is that they have that strong core, and the stats already prove that their midfield is doing a bulk of the work. It's just
inside.
It's just inside forward 50s where they need better conversion.
No, I was talking about the inside midfield.
Oh yeah, the inside. Yeah.
Separate the inside from the outside.
Yeah, it's the outside that needs
always important.
The help more than the inside.
Exactly.
All right, next point. Finishing 7th may have been a pain in 2024. To be fair, there are some teams that have won it from 7th. Didn't they do it in 2016? I can't remember.
Yeah, they won it from 7th.
Well, there you go. They could have done it again. It could have been the miracle. But it could prove the difference maker in getting a better spot in 2025. So they got a pretty soft draw of double ups, Saints and the Dons and North. All should be chances for sweeps, and in the top 6 matchups, they get GWS twice, who they have the wood over in recent times. So their matchups have always been really good, because normally they're played over at Ballarat for the most part.
Yeah. But I was actually surprised because they're all close games. But I think Bulldogs have won 5 of the last 6.
Yeah, that tracks.
I'm
actually
surprised about that.
Well, they're usually very even. It's like GWS and Hawthorn this season. Yeah. There's very even sort of teams. And then only 2 games in their last 11 to finish the season are outside Victoria, which means they get a pretty easy travel score as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's crazy.
They should finish the back half strong.
That's really crazy to look at, because to be fair, they co-tenant Marvel Stadium with 3 or 4 other teams.
It's not that surprising. Like, a lot of Victorian teams have stuff like this. It's for some teams it's like every second or third year, like the Bulldogs.
And this is and I'm sure you're sick of hearing it already, but it's like this is the bit that I feel like interstate fans don't entirely understand about Victorian teams getting so many games at the MCG or so many games at Marvel. It's because they co-tenants with 5 other teams. They're not all home games. Yeah, they might be at our home ground, but they're not home games.
Still not traveling.
Yeah, I know. I get that. That's that's the difference. But that's the reason. I
still think it's more of the difference. It's not you get a home ground advantage. It's traveling sucks.
Yes, it does.
Especially from WA, so.
Well, why do they make Perth so far away?
Just fold Australia in half. Accordion style. Get rid of Adelaide in the Northern Territory.
Yeah, I agree.
Probably move the people first.
Well, I mean, yeah, again, Adelaide only has 7 people in it. The Northern Territory only has 5. So we could just fold them.
I would actually like to visit the Northern Territory someday.
So would I, actually. I think it'd be a good experience to have. Anyway, third point. Despite having hung around the premiership hunt, the Bulldogs, without rebuilding, will go into the season with a healthy amount of young talent in these lines. Helped by father-son picks in Riley West and Sam Darcy, they also have good players that are looking to be the next core, like Freya, Sanders, Ugelhagen, Waitman, and Karmas, who are all under 25 years old. And again, with the mix of their veteran talent that they already have, with the likes of, I guess, Norton in this case now, Bont, Trelaw, Libba, they have a really good mix, and it's similar to Sydney in a way. Is that they have a really good balance of age. It's just about making sure that they're efficient.
Yeah, they didn't actually rebuild to get to this point. They got a few, draft concessions with the academies and all that, and that's sort of, you can't deny that helps. But they've also taken advantage of it. as good as you can. So,
Mm.
as I said, the Bulldogs, you know, for all flaky as they can be, they could really be like already crap in another rebuild. So, the fact that they're already setting up for the next score is going to be really good. And I'll
Yeah.
sort of make notes of this in the next points,
So,
or sometime I will mention.
well, the reasons for pessimism are the Bulldogs had so many things go right in 2024 stats wise, and with that level of offensive dominance, you got to ask, like other teams such as Port Adelaide or GWS, are the sacrifices you make to play your game style coming at the cost of other areas? Are you too team matchup dependent and get obliterated if things don't go your way? Plus, with all of this effort required just to make things go right, if there is any drop in form from last year suggests that they will just get beat easily. And yeah, it's exactly right. Like if it
I
whether
made this a bit wordy,
you
but like
you
my
did,
main
and there
point
was
was
the lack of question marks does not help me in any way. But I get what you're saying,
this
and
Psyrick
it's a
writing
fair point
style.
because you look at the matchup that they had
Yeah.
against, like against St Kilda, for example.
Mm.
It's like we know, like St Kilda are also very inconsistent team. Like if you drop a match like that super heavily, it's not a good look when you can
Yeah.
suddenly go
And
on
it's
next
just one
week
of
and
those
beat a
things.
top 8 team with
Yeah,
ease. It's weird.
exactly. It's like it's almost like you're almost making football as in, are we reaching the threshold to win? If you do, you win comfortably. If you don't, you get beaten.
Yeah,
Like there's no in between. And it's very, as I said, it just takes, as I said, that offensive functioning to drop a bit. And then I said, oh, your left is the bad side. So that's where a lot of their ability comes from there.
yeah, exactly right. All right, next point. The backline is paper thin and has a mix of old, injured, or raw players. They're probably a few years or a couple of season moves away from having a speedier one-on-one defender too. And with Jones missing the first half of the season, they will have to decide whether to put Lob on size or athleticism, or hope Karmas or O'Donnell improves as a one-on-one defender, or Caulfield can stay uninjured. And that's exactly right. Like that's the whole reason why Lob had to move to the backline in the first place, is because
Mm.
they're one they just don't have enough talent down there, and two, a lot of them are injured or can't keep up anymore.
Yeah, and that's the thing with Lob and Jones. As I said, you can put Jones on the smaller defender. Like if the key forward number one is like a speedier type, like maybe a Jai Amos,
Mm-hmm.
you might put Jones on someone else. Maybe a Jones on like oh I don't know, or probably like a Tabernar who they might have been playing with Carlton or whatever. Anyway, and then you put Lob. So you have that versatility to actually put Lob on the number one key forward. But now you're not making the choice. You have to put him. You have to make the choice on who to put him on and then accept the loss. Because as I said, Karmas and O'Donnell, I don't think they're going to be like a lockdown defender, at least for another couple of years. And
Yeah,
Caulfield is there for depth, but he hasn't really managed to find his way on the park all too often.
yeah, exactly right. And it's just hopefully, they find either that experience that they need down back, whether it's just another player that they have on their list, or they just have to field those raw players and just hope that something works out. Because we know that they've been able to find pretty solid, diamonds in the rough sort of thing,
Mm.
out of the out of the draft and stuff like that. So who knows what could happen? Maybe they get lucky.
Mm.
And then the last point, for years the Bulldogs have had top end talent in parts of their ground, mainly the midfield, but haven't worked out how to get the most out of their fringe players. In 2016, it was the role players
Role
of
play.
like Clay Smith, Tory Dixon, and Matthew Boyd. But since then, they've not really had too much depth in talent, and fringe players either find it hard to stay in one spot, as Bevo likes to move the magnets around, as we've seen pretty much all season long last year, or just aren't that good quality, as the bulk of the money is being spent on the midfield and a few of the forward line players like Aaron Norton and his giant contract.
Yeah, exactly. So what I'm trying to say is like an AFL list, you can't have everything. And when you're not able to make those role players produce, it's very hard because every time you're like, oh, they're going to get these massive players, but if your list gets too good, you have to ship off some of your best players.
Mm-hmm.
And you might get stuff on trade, but again, that just sets back. So you're never going to get as far ahead as you think. That's just how equalization in the AFL works.
Yeah.
So that's why I always say it's so important to find the way and it's not saying like players like Clay Smith, Tory Dixon, or Matthew Boyd, like, you know what I mean? Like, they were a bit flash in the plan, but you know what I mean? Like, you put them in position and then you set up the team where like players can, like those can benefit, and they sort of, the way they sort of play, work. Because again, they were a bit more defensive. So, they didn't have as many scores. And
Yeah.
then, with such mercurial players, like all three of those players were in the forward line, when that clicked in 2016, again, with their defense holding up, they just outscored. But you can't really see that happening here because their defense is so loose. It would really require, their back half movement to get a lot better because, as I said, their forward line is already technically functioning. Sure, they can get more accurate, but it's not like the games where they're getting beaten like any close. It's not like they're losing, because their X score wasn't as good as their opponent and they should have been winning. No, they're getting blown out of the water.
Yeah, exactly right.
So it takes more structure, and that's going to be needed from some of your lower numbers from your best 22.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, just to go back to the Richmond Premiership years, like role players like David Asprey, Sean Grigg, Shane Edwards, Liam Baker when he had just broken into the best 22, Jaden Short as well. Those sort of Macintosh, those were all back then
Dan
more
Butler.
role. Yeah, Butler,
Macintosh even.
Castagna. Like we had a bunch of like key role players who you didn't really talk about all that much because you had eyes on like Cochin, Martin, Rewalt, Rance.
Or that one year that Caddy had.
Yeah, well, that was the 2017 year. But yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
Those are the sorts of like role players who you don't necessarily have to need that big talking marks about them, but you just recognize their talents and the efforts that they put on field.
Exactly.
All right, your verdict.
Yep. So, along with Collingwood, they're the most variable team. They're the only team that I've put to a 6 range. Most teams I like to keep 5 or less. But this one I had to put to 6 because, as I said, at their best. Well, actually, no, I'll say this. I don't think they can really outperform what they did in 2024 because I said their forward lines, they still need a couple of years, especially with Jamara missing that off season. I really think that, the only way I can see them really improving is they bulk up a bit, and I still think that's a couple of years down the line. And the midfield is getting a tiny bit older, so I really think they won't improve overall. But I still reckon they can finish around. But as I said, it just takes a few things to go wrong for this to be a disaster year.
Yeah, agreed.
And I think both you and I sort of have that feeling that this might be the year. I actually think their long-term prospects are a lot better than what I'm thinking for this year. I think, a change of scenery, a tinker with game style, that's probably where we're going to see a bit of a change in direction from the Bulldogs, because I don't think they have much of this style left in them.
Yeah.
Like, this might be the last hurrah, and I think that it's just gone a bit past them.
Agreed. And we were talking about this before we started recording, but we're both kind of seeing that this could be the actual last year of Bevo, which, to some Bulldogs fans, they might be happy about that. Some of them might be a bit sad after seeing, depending on how the season goes, they might hope for, if this season goes well, maybe he could get one more year. But I think it's time to start that sort of transition period. And who knows?
Even if they don't change the players, they're starting to look at those players because I said Alex Jones is getting really old. As I said, Liberatore, Adam Treloar himself. So you're starting to look at some really important players that are going to be moved on. Even some fringe players like Jay Hannison, they're going to decide what to do with.
There's a fair chance JJ will probably retire this season because he hasn't been able to stay fit, and it's really rough.
But you know what I mean? It's like, the fact is still on the list, like it's taking a spot. And, when you make those decisions, you start to think about list impact in long term. And I think that's just in the next couple of years. Not saying they'll be rebuilding, but they're just transitioning. And as I said, they've just stretched it out. But I just don't think that they have the consistency to pull it off this year. I think they've missed the mark over the last couple of years in setting up. But it could have been a lot worse. So I'll put
100%. Now, time for the very last team. Both alphabetically.
Could be a bit worse.
both alphabetically.
No, not alphabetically. We went out of order.
Oh, true. Actually, yeah, that's true because we swapped Richmond and
West Coast and Bulldogs too.
oh yeah, true. Yeah, we made a couple of swaps, but that's just was easier to go back and forth between us. But yes, we
Yeah.
now move on to the West Coast Eagles, and as everyone knows, and I will let you take the reins on this, obviously, but as everyone knows,
Yeah.
it was not a great season once more. They're going through a lot, and the win-loss record kind of puts that to paper.
Yeah. Look, some of these I put, a few memes and all that. I put North Melbourne though. Like, I was like, oh, for the bottom three teams, like, add a bit of optimism. But North, I was just like, yeah, I might put a bit of a joke on that one. But obviously, the two main things to be happy about for West Coast Eagle were Harley Reid and Jake Waterman. The rest was all a bit iffy. But, to talk about the starts, not much was expected of them. They were coming from a wooden spoon. Sure, they get Harley Reid, but not too sure what that was going to necessarily mean for them in the first year at the very least.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a really tough draw. It was, like sometimes I like a few teams, like getting a few tough matchups for the lower teams, like maybe round one, maybe round two. But having four, I should say because, you're more likely to get an upset. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, if you got a slightly harder opponent, early on for a bottom team, that's where you can get like the early season upset. Everyone's a bit raw. Getting Port Adelaide Giants, Bulldogs, Swans all in a row. Jeez, you know what I mean?
That's an insanely difficult first 4 rounds.
Yes. But luckily, they got the Tigers at Optus, which turned things around for them.
Honestly,
and they managed to get.
At that time, I think even if we played them at the MCG, I think they still probably would have beaten us.
Yeah, like as I said, they actually found some form in this couple of games. Like they honestly look good. Because as I said, they beat the Dockers at Optus Stadium, Derby upset.
Mm-hmm.
Waterman starts to emerge, kicks 6 on the Tigers, kicks 5, and just generally gets 3 or more for most matches after this. But unfortunately, they find a bit of a lull. They would find a win against the Demons, again a very random one at Optus Stadium. But then it sort of gets a bit harder. And unfortunately, after a disappointing loss to the Crows, Saints, Crows at the time were near the bottom of the ladder. They absolutely obliterated West Coast. Saints, again, struggling team. And then the Kangaroos was the final nail in the coffin for Simo. After that, he would get replaced by
Andrew McQualter.
Andrew McQualter.
Former Richmond assistant coach, made interim coach when Dimmer left. And then I believe he went to... I think he went to St Kilda? No, he came from St Kilda. Oh, he might have gone to... I can't remember. He went to a team when Uze took over, and then obviously went for the recruiting job for West Coast and got the head gig.
Yeah. Unfortunately, a bit rough. A string of losses until they faced the Suns at Optus Stadium. Again, Suns being trashed away. Sort of put the nail in their season. But then had a solid away victory at Ninja Stadium against the Kangaroos. And, it was the last bit of good news for them. They had a dismal performance against the Blues, who were half injured. And then, the Cats at Goomba.
Yeah, everyone remembers that absolute thrashing. Like, the Cats didn't really need that big of a percentage boost, but, they took it in their stride.
Exactly. It was like, theoretically, if Port lost, it would have been really good because it would have assured them getting second. But you know what I mean? It was just, it was a bit more. It put a sour taste in the Eagles' season because they did have a couple of good wins, again upsetting against the Dockers and Demons. And as I said, they were closer to Adelaide than they were North Melbourne. So that was good to see. And way better than 2023.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, I know we're going to look at the stats and it's not going to be that good, but this is actually improvement. They were woeful last year. So, yeah, we'll quickly go through it. Again, with a bottom 3 team like this, none of this is really mattering that much. I'll just give an overview and game style. But as you can imagine, their offense, while it was one of the better parts of their team, they weren't getting the ball there that much. And that sort of reflected in the stats. So, they were 17th on goals for 10th, 16th for shots, inside 50, 17th, goals, assists, 17th. Accuracy, probably an area they could have improved. 45.7 at 16th, but they're also taking forced into, I should say, fairly hard shots. 14th at 3.22. Goals per inside 50, a bit low, but not dregs. 21.6 at 16th. Set shots per inside 50, where they start to improve. 42.2, 42.4 at tied 13th. Again, Jake Waterman, a lot of that. And also Darling and Oscar Allen for the bits of the season that he was involved.
Mm-hmm.
Scores per inside 50 was actually pretty high. So when they got in there, they were very good. But a lot of it was turning into behinds. I wouldn't say very good, but like better. 47.3% chance of getting a score inside 50 at 11th. Offensive one-on-ones has come out in pretty poor. Marks inside 50, again, pretty low, but you're not seeing much. But when you look at the rate, 22.2 at 11th. So it's not too bad. And marks on lead, because again, I checked this, and a lot of these were from the forwards. Again, Jake Waterman being the main culprit. I think he averaged about 2 per game.
Mm-hmm.
2.4, I think, even. And it was really high. So 7 marks on league, 5th in the league in total. So they're really good at marking inside 50 and finding those one-on-one league leads. It just wasn't happening enough. And as you can imagine, inside 50 ground ball gets 13 at 5th in the league, tackles inside 50, 9.4 at 16th in the league, and the opposition rebound rate, 77.4 at 16th in the league. So we're talking about an offense that has a few tolls, but not much on ground level, and they weren't getting the ball inside there enough.
Yeah.
But again, Darling, Waterman, Oscar Allen, all very serviceable. And, it's just, I said, missing Liam Ryan hurt, and missing anyone else that could get the ball at ground level. Because Tyler Brockman sort of failed. Petruccelli playing in the forward line was pretty mediocre. There was a few others that didn't quite make it. Again, BJ Williams showed a bit, but again, he was more the marking side of thing than ground ball disposal.
Mm-hmm.
We'll go to the defense next, because we'll just brush through that, because we all know what it's about.
Yeah.
Goals against very high, 16th in the league, opposition goal assist 16th in the league. Led their opponents take the easiest shots. So 3.38, which led to the opposition being the most accurate in the league at 18th. Goals per inside 50 was 18th in the league, so the most. Set shots per inside 50, 48.5 at getting a set shot. 17th in the league. Scores per inside 50, 17th in the league. Opposition marks inside 50, 18th in the league. Opposition mark inside 50 rate, 18th in the league. Opposition 50 ground ball gets 14th in the league, 16.1. Players like Tom Cole, Luke Edwards as a young defender is not too bad in there. Brady Hoff is another one. And surprisingly, McGovern and Barris both had solid rates. Again, being an undersized defender in the league, they did at least get a bit more spoils. Again, still 15th, but 28. 28 tied 15th in the league. And their their rebound 50 rate, getting the ball out, very, very low. 70.5, 18th in the league. Honestly, it was McGovern and Barras doing most of the intercepting,
Indeed it was.
Brody Hoff and, again, Luke Edwards is only a small, I think it was 6 games from him, but he was played back there. It showed signs. Tom Cole improved, but again, the whole, backline movement. Jamie Cripps is no. Liam Duggan. I don't know why I get those two mixed up. Liam Duggan, again, probably the best distributor back there. But everything else was very variable.
Mm-hmm.
Players that they delisted who we're going to be talking about, like Witherden and not Brandner. Who's the other one?
Baker?
I need to look ahead. No, delisted. Witherden and
there was a Baker that was delisted.
Rotham.
Rotham.
Yeah. So they still played a lot of games. So you know what I mean? It was like, it wasn't great moving from the back half. It was normally going to turnovers and going back inside 50. So made them last in a lot of stats. And generally, they didn't get that much score off turnovers. But again, I think part of that was just because it was so easy to score. Like, they weren't even getting, behinds and all that kicked off them. They were just getting direct score.
Yeah.
So, it was going from turnovers to defeated in the clearances and, back to forward half sort of goals again. Because their movement was awful. They may have been the worst midfield in the league. Disposals was last 18th at 313.5. 318.5.
15.8.
Disposal differential, yeah, whatever number that is. 52.9 loss in disposal differential, 18th in the league. Disposals per turnover, 5.2 disposals before a turnover was recorded, tied 13th in the league. Meters gained, 18th in the league. Meters gained differential, 17th in the league. Very contested, 39.7, but that was sort of, indicating that they couldn't actually find free disposals. They ended up getting tackled a lot.
Mm-hmm.
They ended up having the ball in dispute a lot, turning the ball over, a lot of clangers. Inside 50 differential, 5.1 loss, 16th in the league. Meters per disposal, 17.3 in the league at 4th, but a lot of those were hat kicks, as I mentioned before, a lot of turnovers. Kick percentage was 60.4, 7th in the league, so a lot of aggressive handballs too, I guess. A lot of it was moving the ball forward, just to very little effect.
Yep.
Clearance differential was worst in the league, 4.2, 18th. Tackles, very low, 16th in the league, 56, very low considering they didn't have hands on the ball. Marks, 17th in the league. Contested marks, again, probably more for the forward line, but 6th in the league at 10.3.
Mm-hmm.
Ground ball differential, 1 loss, which is 8th. But again, when you look at post-clearance ground ball differential, so stuff from the centre ground, 3.1 loss, 18th in the league. Gathered hit out, 5.4 loss, 18th in the lead. So getting smacked from the ruckman, specifically, again, Bailey Williams struggling a bit. And intercepts generated for themselves, 59.7, which is 18th in the league. All round, pretty terrible, not much identity. A bit contested. Again, Yo helps with some of that. Harley Reid comes in, is very good at that, but just nothing clean. It was all very hard fought.
It also doesn't help that Elliot Yo is just continuously injured, like he is right now. So it's like, because he only played like I think 10 games.
He played 18 games last year.
Did he?
I think.
I think he was out for a lot longer than that.
Nah, I don't think so. I'll check.
I mean, either way, like I know he's always been one of the consistent midfielders, especially the past couple of years.
Yeah.
It's just
20.
Oh,
20
okay.
games.
He did play more than I thought.
Yeah.
In fact, he played double what I thought.
Yeah.
But yeah, like as much as the stats don't look very good at all, a lot of the heavy lifting in that midfield was Harley Reid, was Elliot Yo, and then obviously McGovern and Barras in their defense.
Supported. Yeah.
He did whatever he could. There wasn't really much for like those three to really work with.
Whatever he could, but he was there. Like he was a part of it. It was just very hit or miss.
Yeah. It's unfortunate that he went to West Coast at a time where West Coast are just really bad after leaving Geelong, a team that's very good. So it doesn't.
He made his own bet. He could have gone to Freo.
Yeah, that's true. Honestly, I think Freo would probably still take him if they offered, but they don't entirely need him currently.
Yeah, they'd have to change role, but yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll go on the list changes that have actually happened, and unfortunately, Blazy, block your ears. We're going to go in for the.
We've already talked about it. It's fine.
Yeah, I know. Liam Baker, obviously, from the trade, and Jack Graham from free agency. Liam Baker, from what we've seen, looking to play the practice matches as a halfback. We're going to talk about that a bit later. And Jack Graham and Matt Always from Carlton, looking to bolster the forward line. From the draft, they pick up Bo Allen, who is a player that could develop into an inside midfielder. And is also
the brother of Oscar Allen.
Is he?
Yeah, he is.
Sure.
I'm pretty sure
it is. I never read that, but I'm like, I feel like if it was, I would know it.
I will double check. You keep going, I will double check.
All right. They picked up Jobe Shanahan at pick 30, Tom Gross at pick 46, Hamish Davis at pick 65, and a coast-to-coast legend, Malachi Champion. We're all gunning for him. What a name. And he looked good in the preseason knockout, apparently. So, I think it might have been an intra-club. So, should be seeing him next year, but who knows?
Okay, I am wrong.
Thought so.
I thought I had something there, but I do not.
Yeah, it's all good. As for the outs, trade and free agency, they lose a big one. Tom Barras traded to Hawthorn. That's going to be a really big hole. And I think Jack Darlin is actually a significant loss for West Coast. And we'll talk about why in a bit. But he was still pulling out useful numbers, even if they weren't dominant. I know he's not the favourite down there, but there's some aspects about him that I think the Eagles are missing, and they're trying to look for it in other areas.
Mhm.
I just think, it's still a bit of structure. Delisted, Alex Witherden, Jordan Baker, um, Kobe Burchill, Jai Cully, Luke Edwards, which is, if I've said Luke Edwards before, I definitely meant Harriet. In fact, I think it may be Harry Edwards that was delisted. I don't
No,
know
it is Luke
anymore. They're
Edwards
all
because
the
I'm the one
same
that
to
wrote it
me.
down.
Yeah, Harry Edwards is the defender. Um, if I said Luke instead of Harry, I'm apologizing. Jermaine Jones, Josh Rotham, Zane True, retired Andrew Gaff. We've already talked to him at length, but
Hmm.
sort of a loss of an outside midfielder, but his drop off was definitely significant,
Yeah,
so
he
no
probably needed
surprises
to
there.
retire like 2 years ago rather than now. But
Yeah, unfortunately. It's just hard when you're not actually that old, you're just out of form and
yeah,
it's a lot longer. You think you're going to get back on the track, but he just never did. Going to important players, a bit of optimism, I guess. I'm starting with Liam Ryan, small forward, and unfortunately for the last few seasons, he's just struggled to get his body right. He had absolutely no preseason heading into last year, and although he did add a bit of fair enough, he just didn't get enough shots, and he
hmm
just, his groundwork is worse than some of the key forwards. That's sort of where I mentioned, Jack Darling. I didn't realize I put him so early, but Jack Darling actually had more ground ball gets in the forward line than Liam Ryan averaged. Uh, and I think it was about the same for tackles inside 50. So technically, there's not much small forward pressure difference between Liam Ryan
hmm
and Jack Darling, which I think a few West Coast fans might be surprised to hear. I don't think he's that type of player anyway, and I think Owi's coming in, and we'll talk and mention that, sort of, that's where they're aimed to fix, but they need him to just provide offense in 2025.
yeah,
Um, you know, because they're missing a lot of finish and polish. And I think if they can find a way to get the ball in there a bit more, with a bit of preseason, I think Liam Ryan can still be like a 40 goal forward for the Eagles coming into 2025. I don't think I'm not sure how willing I'm saying he is to get there, but I think he can do it. I think 35 to 30 is the benchmark where you'll be disappointed for less. But 40 would be a really good year.
yeah, I
And
agree.
you'd probably see the Eagles improve. Um, Talking about Bailey J. Williams and Matt Flynn, the ruck situation for West Coast 2024 did not treat these two well. Injury left Matt Flynn out for most of the year and pretty cold when he returned, while Williams still can't get any support as a young developing ruckman. He's only 23 and he's played half a career already before a lot of ruckmen even debut. So while some of his general stats improved, he actually went backwards in some ruck stats. So I think that maybe because, he approached the preseason thinking he was going to play more forward.
Hmm.
He's actually more of a forward ruck prospect when he was drafted, but he's just sort of had to adapt. So I'm hoping with a good preseason, more structure for the both of them, they can help turn around the Eagles' horrid clearance stats.
Yeah,
I don't know who takes the main role. I think it actually is still Bailey, but I think having him not play as much will help him out.
yeah, because if you have someone that young who's that
Mm,
tall but still not as big bodied as he's meant to be as a number one ruck, you don't want to put
mm.
too much pressure on him that already as it already has been. Whereas
Yeah,
you'd rather
exactly.
play him as a secondary ruck just because his body still isn't right where it needs to be. But
Mm.
their hands are
Yeah.
very tied in this regard.
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, I don't actually think Matt Flynn is going to be a long-term prospect at this point. But so it's either they shuffle it around, but they might as well see through Bailey Williams. It's just he needs help still.
Yeah,
It's clear he's not getting enough pure stats to I'm not saying he is a hindrance, but it's definitely a net negative. But he's all right around the ground and he tries hard.
yeah,
Our
100%.
favorite try on the Coast to Coast podcast. Um, Ruben Gibney, one person we mentioned a bit earlier, inside midfielder, turned into a small defender, sort of played a middling support role earlier in the year inside the inside midfield, then got put in the back line and played surprisingly well. Obviously, he's pretty good at ground level and his disposal can use a bit of work, but they have enough distributors, and I only say that in the context of them getting Liam Baker into the side.
Mm-hmm.
And I know like his disposal isn't like his best quality, but like compared to some of the Eagles, it's still better
Yeah.
than what they've got back there. So it might not be a big of an issue, you know. Okay. Going on to defenders, Harry Edwards, I've put the right one down now. So again, a bit speculative, only played 8 last year. Decent as a key defender, but very injury plagued. But because Barask is gone, it's just elevated his importance in the time
Mm-hmm.
because he is one of the better contested marks and all-round defenders for the Eagles. So if he can hold up, it just makes that loss not hurt as much. And I literally believe if he doesn't, you know, if he gets injured again, I'm locking in Eagles for the worst defense in the league. Like they might already be there, but I can imagine, like, you know, if Harry Edwards and like Gibney keeps on going well, it might not be as bad, but yeah, no, it's looking pretty
Well,
dark from the outset.
the only major consistent performer you have down there now is McGovern, and he's
Yeah.
not that far off retiring. So they need to start, you know, putting some more focus into that back line. And Gibney and Harry Edwards are both really good like prospects in that regard.
Yeah, exactly. And again, not surprisingly, I'm looking for someone who wasn't so much in the 2024 team, you know, to come in and lift. And I'm finishing it off with Elijah Hewitt. Probably not as bit known outside of the West, you know, but a pretty solid draft pick. I think he was like pick 7 or something. Sort of forgotten it in the terribleness of the 2023 Eagles, but he had a really good debut season.
Mm-hmm.
And then he was ruled out all of 2024 due to injury. But Hewitt, I sort of actually compare him to Harley Reid in the fact that he was winning a solid amount of clearances for a debut season inside midfielder. Obviously not as contested as Harley, and I'm not trying to say like, you know, but you can see where like, you know, they might be the next pairing for the next 5 or 6 years. And his training again, he'll be an upgrade of what Gibney produced from the first half of the season. And that will also free him to be able to play defense.
Yeah.
So it's not just the fact that he will, you know, come in, maybe provide a few more stats. You know, he'll also allow some other things. And again, pray that Elliot Yeo doesn't get injured again or whatever. But at least they've got some sort of player that they might bring in for him if that even happens. But I actually think he'll start in the best 22 in the guts. You know, maybe start on the bench, you know, maybe get that 70 to 80% time on ground.
Mm-hmm.
But he'll definitely be involved in there.
Yeah, 100%. I think. Well, I mean, all they can really do currently is just get get experience into their younger players, and just hope they find a significant core that they can build around. Whether that's a core in
Exactly.
defense, a core in the midfield, or a core up forward. Which I think the core up forward they're kind of already developing pretty well, but it's not
Yeah, it's
100% there
just
yet.
lopsided.
Yeah,
It's like, it's the key forwards, Liam Ryan if he's fit, and then you start to see a big drop off.
yeah, exactly right.
So, what are the new faces looking to improve? Liam Baker, we already talked about him a tiny bit. Again, his ball use isn't as good. I did mention it before, but what is really looking to be is some ferociousness, because we said the Eagles weren't a good tackling team or defensive pressure team, considering how much they didn't have the ball.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think he's a really smart player. So, because sometimes you see him, both ends when he was playing forward and defense, he was very good at actually coming up to stop clearances like knock-on clearances from becoming inside 50s. Like he'll grab the ball early. So he's actually a bit aggressive, but it's a good sort of aggressive, you know, and it's very gritty. And maybe that even starts some forward chains, you know, because again, there was almost nothing from the Eagles back half. You know, McGovern was up there just because he got a lot of intercepts. And then it was like, you know, you're looking to be like 12% scoring involvement under for the rest of anyone in the Eagles back line.
Yeah.
So if you can add a bit there, really ready forward, but even just his pressure.
Yeah.
And somewhat his ball use.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, and the benefit of the Bakes is that he's a small swingman. He's not a tall swingman who can like play both tent poles of the ground plus the middle plus like the ruck. but he's a small swingman where he can play inside mid, he can play outside mid, he can play small forward, play small back. He's got that versatility about his game where he will always be able, he can always be put in a position where he can put pressure on the ball. Whether that ends up equating to a score or not, obviously that remains to be seen because his ball use, especially over the past year or two, hasn't been that great. Stats wise, will tell you that. But he's got great. He's got really good ability for ground ball gets. He's got a really good kick on him. He can kick it long fairly well, and obviously he's got great legs as well. So he knows how to put on that heavy pressure.
Yeah, and 4 quarters too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Always
he knows how to run
running
out a game, which is very good.
Yeah, and that's why I put him as utility as well, because it's like, I'm not saying utility as in like what you think of forward. I'm like literally any area of the ground where you need pressure, you can put Liam Baker.
Literally.
You could put him deep, but I think that would be a waste of his talent. Like deep forward.
Yeah, deep forward would be a waste because you look at a West Coast. How often is it going to be down there?
Exactly, but like he could theoretically. Yes. The person who is going to put pressure, Matt Owie, small forward. Again, much needed pressure boost for the Eagles forward line. He's a very great tackler. He still generates a lot of shots and he's surprisingly decent marking option for a small forward. Knows how to work under the tolls. As we know, he worked under Mackay and Curnow.
Yep.
And should fit right into the forwards mix because, as I said, like I know Waterman and Oscar Allen are a bit different from those two, but it sort of functions around the same. As I said. But yeah, as I said, Matt always, I think some of the knock was him like going out of games, but you got to remember, like Carlton were woeful at like targeting anyone that wasn't, Curnow and I've just said it before, Mackay.
Yes.
So if Matt always gets it in the ears, maybe they can actually add some variety with Matt always going in, because they're looking to rebuild anyway. They're not committed to anything, so maybe he can actually find himself more involved because his pressure off the ball stuff is always there. He just comes in and out of scoring, despite as I said, being the 3rd highest goal kicker for Carlton last year.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it was like 32 or something.
Yeah, he had over 30 goals off the top of my head.
Yeah. And finally, Jack Graham, half forward, midfielder. I'd say probably edging towards more outside than inside, but you have to say.
Yeah, he was drafted and played the premiership years as an inside mid. He was always always on ball, always a strong tackling pressure. It's why he's called the fridge.
Yeah. I thought he drifted out, but maybe I'm misremembering. That's why I asked you.
It's been a bit of both. It was mostly injury didn't really help because he just got pushed out kind of a bit because of it. But yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, going back into the Eagles, again, this is sort of just a grit player. He's a tackling machine. His ground clearance work is what the Eagles desperately need because Eagles were absolutely woeful in the stoppages. Probably the worst stoppage team in the competition. And yeah, as I said, so a lot of pressure, as we mentioned, is on Harley Reid, getting those clearances. And someone like Jack Graham can, just let Harley Reid come in and out. He's already getting more than he should for a first-year player. He'll get more than he should for a second-year player. But you know what I mean? Like, at the end of the day, the Eagles are still 18th in clearance differential. They need more.
Yeah, 100%.
So, as I said, they'll have Yo for when he comes back, Jack Graham and then Kelly can be that outside sort of link because he was never a huge clearance. Well, he's never a huge center clearance winner. His stoppages has dropped off, but that's sort of another problem.
Yeah, agreed.
But let's not talk about problems. Let's look for reasons for optimism. Eagles, as I said, I would say have pretty much been directionless since COVID. Partially due to injuries, partially due to the fallout of some pretty mediocre list management. Like, I know they were slaughtered with injuries for 2020 and 2021, but you look at the list now, you look at who they recruited, and they made some pretty iffy decisions. But the players that they're looking to draft for now that sort of survived that process, you can actually see the long-term future. Like I said, Tom Cole's finally stood up, Brady Hoff, Luke Edwards, Ruben Gibney,
Harry Edwards,
all those sort of players. Harry Edwards, I've done it again. Oscar Allen and Jake Waterman, other two, slightly older but same gist. So yeah, we're starting to see Eagles play for position rather than covering for injuries and form, and that's really good.
Sorry, I just
Last
read your last point, and I think it's really funny.
Yeah, well, you know what I mean. It's like, you know what? It's not like a Bevo movement where they're sort of trying to generate, like, they're literally just shuffling because they've got no other
Yeah,
choice. They're trying to play the best 22 they've got with the talent they've got. Because last year they still had a fair bunch of injuries. Again, they were behind Richmond for the most unique players used. And I know some of that was form as well, but they've still had a fair chunk of injuries.
yeah, they did.
Again, decent scalps in the Dockers and Melbourne. And while statistically they were in the same realm as the other two teams, they were a lot closer, as I said, in terms of wins and percentage to Adelaide. They're only 5% behind them, I think. I think that's what I mean by that. Spoiler alert, I was a bit busy too last week, so some of this is a bit off
It's
in
all right.
terms of the way I phrase some things, but so they're at least on the right track. And as I said, their statistics compared to last year were a lot better. Like, again, last year abysmal, this year at least some direction. So theoretically, upward trend. And finally, I know it's a bit, I don't know, controversial, but like,
To have such a young
because Andrew
coach.
McQuarter is so young, only 6 years older than McGovern. And I'm going to say, because I'm pretty confident he's the only head coach to have ever played for the Gold Coast Suns.
You would
I don't,
be off the top of my head, you would be correct in that assumption.
yeah, I honestly couldn't imagine too, because I think like the next closest to play is probably Hardwick. Can't. No,
Uh,
Stewie do. Sorry. No, wait, Stu's not in. Yeah, Hardwick, wouldn't it? Yeah.
it'd be a cross between
Retired
like
2005.
Hardwick or Fly. Because Fly played for Brisbane. He was part of the premiership teams.
Yeah. I thought he retired after the 2003, but I might be wrong.
The
Anyway,
Scots as well. They're both kind of in the same boat.
yeah, Scots would have outlasted Hardwick. Anyway, going into trivia here, but we're on about the Eagles. But again, I cannot stress as much. Last year, after the season ended, or sorry, in between, because as I said, McWalter, I don't think he was set to take the coaching role. But, so they were looking, they couldn't really find anyone for the coaching job. But the fact that he said yes before the preseason, so, they can head into 2025 with some respect and optimism and, a list to where, Andrew McQualter can have some discussion, start looking at the way he wants to coach and really get it set up before the season starts. So hopefully with a bit more direction from him, I know he's still young, but he'll have a clear direction this year of what he wants to do.
Yeah, 100%. Like you, now that they have like someone with like fresh eyes, a fresh open mind, they're able to
Mm,
approach the next couple of years very differently. They don't have to hold on to the ghosts of the past of how the COVID years were. They're able to just
yeah.
focus forward on what they have in front of them, and obviously draft picks ahead, and however that may shuffle, maybe players that they have an eye on that could be traded, stuff like
Mm,
that,
yeah,
and just and
exactly.
just focus
So
on building a new core essentially.
exactly. Now, reason for pessimism, again, I'll just brush through these because there's a lot of pessimism brought up, but I've already mentioned it. Key defenders wise, they are so thin. And that was last year, and now they couldn't get Barras to stay on. So again, it is maybe arguable if they're the worst team defensively. Again, they're sort of battling with North Melbourne there, but all it takes is a McGovern injury for it to be catastrophically bad and an Edwards/Hoff injury to be very slapdash and really undersized. So no real surprises there. I don't think that much needs to be said for that. Despite the hype around Harley being warranted, I still think it's a year before he gets the body to really make a game per game season helping impact. The people that were going to say he's going to come in and, take them to the fun, it's just, it's so hard, when a young kid on your own. You need bodies around them. Like, even Selwood, who was straight away, he still had a lot of support around him at the time, whether it was, Gary Ablett or Harley. No, not Tom Harley. Who's the other bold guy that was the midfielder? Paul Chapman.
Yes.
Anyway, all those sort of players. So yeah, as I said, we've got Yo, who's had a iffy preseason, is in the mix to maybe play round one. We're still not sure, but you know what I mean? It's still too much of the game plan goes around his broken body, and Kelly seems to fade about much. They need a bowl winner, but realistically, I can't really see who's going to provide that for 2025. Because again, Baker could go in the midfield at times. Even Graham, as you mentioned, could go to the midfield at times. But I still think they're going to be in areas that aren't that, So I think there's still going to be a bit of pain while they build the next core of midfielders, which will take another couple of years to develop.
Yes. Just to touch back on very quickly about the idea of Andrew McQualter being, Dimmer being one of the last players to become coaches. The most recent one is actually Sam Mitchell.
Of course.
Because his last game was in 2017 where he played for West Coast.
Yeah, exactly. Who we're talking about now. Thanks for that. I would have got pretty embarrassed. I like to think I'm good at quizzes and all that, but sometimes your brain just doesn't function.
Yeah, just been going through this. I kind of just been looking at every single coach, and the last three that are close enough are McQualter, who I think his last game was like 2012, 2013 with the Gold Coast Suns.
Really?
Dean Cox,
oh yeah, right,
who retired in 2014.
Yeah.
Oh well, good. Yeah, and then Sam Mitchell, who retired 2017.
Yeah. All right. So the Eagles cast off a lot of picks between the players that they picked up between 2017 and 2024. I know I sort of mentioned this in the optimism section. There's sort of the flip side, two sides of the coin. So while they have defined a core, it just hurts that there's not much left over that year that have been naturally grown. Because you think about the players that are sticking around from that era, your Kellys, your Jaden Hunts, and others.
Honestly,
like
I forgot that Jaden Hunt is still playing, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly. So you know what I mean? It's like a lot of those were brought in. So I really compare this to 2018 Gold Coast, where they had a complete failure in their first few years, and it really caused the rebuild to take longer than they think. And I think the worst of it's over. I just think it's mediocrity to come.
Yeah.
Because again, they need at least 3 or 4 years still. So they might come out of the bottom four. But even then, I don't think it's going to be that great.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, we'd like to hope for good positive signs, and hopefully a lot of optimism coming through this season, even if they have another mountain of losses. But it's only hopes.
Yeah. And when I say out the bottom of the four, I do actually mean in 2 years' time, because as we get to the verdict, again, I like the players that they gain, like North. I think, similar to North, but, as I said, they even have the advantage of those players being a bit more in their prime, a bit less veteranish. I just can't see them winning enough of the ball. Weighted numbers, they're going to be in a crushed due to the Barraslessness defense. Barraslessness.
I don't know if that entirely works, but we'll go with it.
Barraslessness. I don't know. And yeah, I said the wins probably say about the same. I think North will get more wins than the Eagles. I think they should improve a tiny bit. But the Eagles will be like 4 or 5 wins. Predicted range 15th to 18th. Bottom 4 lock. We've got another lock to end the season. End the reviews. And my gut feel, if you've been doing the math, has got to be 17th. No surprises. So yeah, we'll do one final rundown. Number 1, Geelong Cats. Number 2, Brisbane Lion. Number 3, GWS. Number 4, Port Adelaide. Number 5, Hawthorn. 6, Fremantle. 7, Sydney. 8th, Collingwood. 9th, Carlton. 10th, Adelaide. 11th, Melbourne. 12th, Western Bulldogs. 13th, Gold Coast Suns. 14th, St Kilda. 15th Essendon, 16th North Melbourne, 17th West Coast, recently added, and 18th Richmond.
And as I promised, right at the start of these preseason analysis breakdowns, I would have my season ladder at the end, and that is exactly what I have formed. So we're very similar in the way we've done ours, where everyone's kind of located. I have shuffled a couple around, mostly because it's we were talking about this prior to recording. It's all extremely minute where everyone's going to go. Like it's going to be either like one, maybe 1.5 games difference and percentage.
Yeah.
Like
and I think
genuinely, like the middle of the pack could easily be flipped.
Yeah, and I will say, just in general, like our general agreements is that Brisbane Geelong probably near the top. I'm not sure if you had GWS near that. I know I said it was top 2, but
I'd put GWS maybe probably a game off, maybe a game and a half as well.
Yeah,
but they're they're contending.
Say, like GWS to Fremantle is very interchangeable.
Yeah,
like they're going to be roughly the same amount of wins.
And then again, like Carlton to the Doggies are probably also very interchangeable for me as well. And it's just those extremely minute sort of shifts. Anyway,
exactly.
So I'll run down mine. So first I've got Brisbane instead of Geelong, and second I've got Geelong instead of Brisbane. So we just swap those two around. Again, it's extremely close between those two. I think the loss of Joe Danaher will hurt Brisbane a fair amount. But I think they will have enough momentum and enough that they've worked on in the off season with their younger talls and the younger prospects to be able to kind of contend with that just fine.
Prepared.
Yeah, they knew it was coming, I would say.
Yeah.
But it's going to be extremely minute with Geelong. Like I think Geelong are a great team right now, as they kind of have been for the past decade and a half. But it's just going to be very very flipped as to. Or like extremely close as to whether they'll be in first or second. Then third and fourth, I've got GWS and Port. Fifth, I've got Hawthorn. Again, I think we've kind of talked about this already, that they're basically all in a very similar position.
Exactly.
Sydney, I've got seventh instead of sixth. I've got sixth instead of seventh. I think they'll bounce back just from that rough loss in the grand final. Do I think that they'll bounce back in the same way that they played in 2024? No, because I think their holes are a lot more obvious now. And whether they filled them in properly, I don't think so. But I still think they'll play finals. I don't think they'll drop off just yet, if they drop off at all. Fremantle, I've got seventh. Again, they're kind of very interchangeable. Fremantle could punch a lot higher, and I expect them to punch a lot higher. But I think at the end of the day, their holes are pretty much still just as visible as Sydney's. And whilst I think they will play finals rather than miss, it's going to be by fairly slim margins. Same with Carlton in that regard. Like I think Carlton will probably play the same way that they did this in 2024. So I've got them in 8th, and I think they will contend for that final spot again. But again, it's going to be very, very slim because I think middle of the pack is all about the same. Adelaide, again, I could see them playing finals, but right now I've got them sitting 9th. They have the right pieces. It's just, as we talked about when we talked about them at the very start of these preseason analysis, it's just about making sure that midfield is right after all of that middling and all of that frustration that they had throughout 2024. Obviously, when they lost Rankin to suspension and injury, that didn't help them at all. And now that they've got Thilthorpe back full time, that's incredible for their forward line. Tex probably playing out his final year in 2025. So he probably won't play as many games. He probably won't travel all that much. So you just want to hope that Thilthorpe is able to develop with Ben Keys and everyone else in that forward line. As we already know, their defensive line is really, really solid. We've both been very happy with that. Yeah. So they could punch their way into finals. But at the moment, it's going to be very slim margins. Collingwood, I've dropped to 10th, partially because I just don't like Collingwood, but also because, again, it's going to be very, very 50-50 throughout that middle of the pack. Like they could play finals. If I see them making finals, I think it'll take the 7th or 8th spot. I don't see them making top 6. But it's going to be very dependent on how they gel, because they had a lot of issues last season.
12, 13 or 11 sort of year.
Yeah.
Like one of those 3 wins.
Like I think, again, they have great pieces. We already know they have great pieces. They've proven they have great pieces. And, I'm a big fan of Jack Crisp. As much as I don't like Collingwood, I like Jack Crisp. I've spoken about him at length at this point. And I think he's part of that core midfield that can really make a huge difference. But it's just about finding that consistency again with that forward line, because it was only really Bobby Hill who did majority of the work last season.
Yeah, exactly.
And then Darcy Moore getting back into some good form in that defensive line, and our big Billy Frampton as well, like coast to coast zone Billy Frampton. We need, if you want Collingwood to perform well, you need all of those cogs working really well, and that defensive line and the forward line are two kind of big points.
Yeah, very iffy. Yeah.
Melbourne, I've got at 11th. Good. I hope that midfield does something, because we all know how that turmoil went.
Get Petrarca and pray.
Yeah, exactly. The Doggies, I have at 12th. I want to put them higher. I desperately wanted to put them higher. But
yeah, I was surprised that you had him at 12th. Because he hadn't, I think you hadn't really looked at the analysis that I did before.
No, I hadn't. I kind of was just going off of my own guts on this one, and it's I want to put them higher, but they haven't. That especially with the holes in the defense now.
Yeah.
Granted, Lob back there has been a miracle, and it's been great for them, but it's just about if they can fix their holes in the back line, they could definitely contend higher. I could see them playing finals again. But it's very, very slim as to what's going to happen. Because again, as we just spoke about, their midfield statistics incredible. It's their forward line,
except when they weren't.
Yeah, except for when they weren't. Again, they're very inconsistent.
It's like that soccer gif where it's like that European coach is like, sometimes we're good, other times we are very, very crap.
Yep, exactly right. So yeah, they could contend higher. I could see them play finals, but they got to be on the ball. They got to be in form, and they can't just be Bontempelli doing most of the work again.
Exactly, yeah.
At 13th, I have Gold Coast. Again, I want to put them higher, but I don't think they're there just yet. They finally figured out their core that they're trying to build around. Their forward line, they've still got a couple of pieces they're still trying to contend with. Their back line is really solid, especially with the inclusion of Dan Rioli, the one that I wish would have stayed, but you know how it is. And obviously, as we talked about at length, their midfield core is incredible, but it's just about not having one or two players do majority of the work, and kind of.
I'll say potential's still ahead of where their stats is.
Yeah,
that's my gripe. But otherwise, I still believe they're very talented.
100%, and we love that Matt Rowell is a clearance bull, is a tackling bull, but it can't just be him doing all of that heavy lifting.
Yeah.
And then 14th, I've got St Kilda. I want to put them higher, but they've lost a couple of pieces. Battle is that big one. And they just got to try and hopefully build on the momentum that they had at end of season, and just try and get some more consistent form and some good experience into their younger players. Essendon, I don't see the edge coming back anytime soon. I think they're going to stay firmly where they are. Which is unfortunate, because they have good potential, but it's just there's not much hope there right now.
It would take a lot of youth playing extremely well.
And it also doesn't help that they have a fair amount of injuries right now that isn't boding well for them. Well, at least to start their season off. We'll talk about all this next week.
Honestly, I've forgotten, but I believe you.
There's a couple. North Melbourne.
That's a big thing.
As we touched on earlier, we want to put them and West Coast. They're basically in the same boat. We want to put them higher, but there isn't enough there to put them out of the top, out of the bottom four just yet. North, I think, again, definitely have more potential to get out of the bottom four before West Coast do, especially with the inclusion of the veteran talent that they acquired. But they won't have Wardlaw start of the season, which isn't going to bode well, because I think they have a couple of tough teams early on. But we'll see what happens. As long as we see Suv kick a bag, that's what I want to see. And then finally, I do have Richmond at 18th. My optimism for Richmond after reading a little bit about how we played in our match sim against West Coast earlier today as of recording. It is some positive signs. It's all just young talent. You've got to get some game time into them, some experience into them. I would like to hope that we can surprise a couple of teams, whether it's North Melbourne, West Coast, or even, Essendon, St Kilda, whatever. But I just don't see us getting out. I don't see us getting out of bottom 4. I could see us getting out of 18th, but yeah, it's going to be very, very slim. And I just hope that I'm expecting us to get decimated by the good teams. But I'm just hoping that against the teams that we can play closer to, that it's not an absolute thrashing by them.
Yeah, I think it's like the link up, it's so hard to expect a team full of essentially rookies that haven't played too much together to like brilliantly move the ball. But, if they can get a team, generate a few turnovers, maybe get a bit of a bright spark, the defense is still okay. Their offense is still got bits and pieces that theoretically,
we've
if it
still
all
got
went together.
6 ACL players that aren't going to come back until a couple weeks into the season anyway.
Yeah,
and that'll be
so...
when things start to gel again, especially in that defense.
Yeah,
because that's where we've got 2 or 3 of them.
As I said, I will say it's not 100% that Richmond will win the spoon. Like, I think it's a lot less separated than people think.
Yeah, agreed. Like, I know there are a lot of, pretty much everyone that I've spoken to kind of about this or read about this has us at 18th, and that's fine because that's where we're all expected. But it's not 100% guaranteed because I think we can surprise a couple of teams, but whether that happens,
I'd say 80. Give me 80. I can imagine like a West Coast with a bad run of injuries, especially that defense.
Yeah.
Even Essendon, North, St Kilda, maybe if it's like specific people. All those teams could possibly finish 18th. I'd probably put the range to include it.
Yeah. I don't see St Kilda finishing 18th.
Oh, no, not St Kilda.
I could see Richmond possibly getting over St Kilda.
If St Kilda's is like a really bad, like, when I do my ranges, I'm like, if there's like reasonable amount of injuries, like 14th, like I think that's where I put St Kilda. But then if it's like more than reasonable, that's where, St Kilda's like close enough to the bottom to where an extreme amount of injuries, I could see them coming last.
Yeah, exactly right. So that is it. That is our ladder predictions for the 2025 season. Next week we'll mostly just be catching up on match simulation stuff. So if any injuries have come out from that, any injuries that have happened as we've done this analysis series, might catch up on just how the teams are looking overall as well. Because for these match sims, most teams aren't playing their veteran talent; they're just playing all the younger players. For example, for us, Camden McIntosh was our most experienced player on field today, and we played 3 of our 2024 draftees, one being Sam Layla, as I mentioned earlier. If you're interested in any of the references and links that we used, or Psyrick mostly used, I should say, in these rundowns, they are all right here. Fair chance we'll just put them in the description as well of the YouTube video and the Spotify video.
And I will say, I'll probably do a social about it. I was going to talk to you a bit after, but I'll mention it on the fly now. Like, I was going to do a social saying, we've wrapped up the team, and I will release the documents that we use. So we wrote up most of this stuff. Most of it we sort of read off, but there's like some things we've written that sort of, we went a bit, sometimes I use the PowerPoint a bit more. So I thought I'd release it all, just in case anyone, wanted to look, in case, maybe you've, gone through the preview, but you've forgotten and don't feel like going back over it, you might have a handy little reference there. So, we'll release the PowerPoint. You can get that rundown version. We'll release the docs. You can get the written version. You can see all the bad jokes that I like put in and like cowardly not read out. But yeah, as I said, some of the writing might be a bit funny. That's just how I roll. Yeah, as I said, and Blazy, as I said, writes a bit different to me. So, I still think it's really good. I'm really proud of the analysis we did. I think it's very comprehensive. If anyone listened to like a bulk of this, A, I'm amazed, and B, thank you. If you just listened to your team, we really appreciated you. And, if you're just skipping around, just for a bit of fun, or maybe you don't care about this and you want to get back to the chill sort of thing, as we go closer to the season, it'll be a bit more informal. I'll still break down things here and there, but, it will just be chatting in general about the season as it goes.
Yeah, because we've still got what, another 2 3 weeks
I think
until the
2
season
weeks.
officially
Yeah.
starts. So again, yeah, we'll just catch up
The
on
unofficial,
yeah.
the start of the season.
Yeah,
Round
so
zero.
we'll catch up on match sim stuff, injuries, any other important news.
Yeah,
Might even catch back
exactly.
up on what's going on in Tassie.
Tassie, SSPs,
Yeah, because there's a couple that's still being
supplemental players.
announced.
Yeah.
For example, there was one for Port earlier today.
So I'll talk about that next week.
Yeah, we might also do finals predictions. I know it's super early on, but who knows what could happen. We might just, toss something out there.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll do something.
And then there was one other bit that I was going to mention. I have already forgotten it. It was right there, and now it's not anymore. Oh well.
Fantastic content. That's what. Oh, yep.
As I mentioned at the start of the episode, I will be away for this weekend. We will have time to record the podcast as normal and get it out as normal, so you don't have to worry about that, audience. But that does mean Psyrick might have bulk of the work to do. Hopefully that won't come to it, and I'll be able to get some stuff done on Monday when I come home.
Yeah.
Or like during the flights or whatever. I can type some
I'll
stuff
try and get. I'll try and get like either if I can find an article or just condense it into a document. I'll try and get like all the supplementary stuff done for you, all the entries. So hopefully, the viewer can just have a brief look through as we run through. So
yeah,
I'll try and
hopefully
get that
hopefully
organized,
next
but
week
we
or
should be
two
good.
should be pretty chill and should be pretty much smaller episodes than what these have been. But that's
Yeah.
okay. So that will do it for us. Thank you so much for listening to or watching episode 46. Again, as Sarek said, if you've managed to listen or watch the entire thing, we appreciate that very much. If you're just here for your own team, we also appreciate that very much. If you've just been skipping around looking for anything specific, we also appreciate that very much. Please check out our socials. Mine, Sarek's Instagram, not that he uses it all that much, or the podcasts. Again, it's kind of mostly just Instagram and TikTok that I've been uploading to because I got locked out of Twitter like ages ago and I just haven't been bothered. Facebook, it's a dumb platform. Not worth it. And then obviously the episodes go out on YouTube, Spotify. So please go check those out. If you're listening from one platform, maybe you want to listen to the other. There is minor differences because I do a lot of, I guess, closer editing for the Spotify episodes just to make it a lot cleaner. So yeah, if you're interested in that rather than the YouTube format, please go check that out. Otherwise, if you want to find me, I'm streaming. Actually, when this episode goes live, I might be live that night after about 9 p.m, maybe 9:30-ish. I'm not too sure because I'm running a show match in Overwatch. And that would be if I do end up streaming on the day that this episode goes out, which is Wednesday the 19th. I will hopefully see you all there. Otherwise, I will see you all on the Monday after when I get back from my trip. But yes, until then, thank you all so much once again. And we will see you all next week for episode 47. So until then, take care.